getting a bit clumsy in my old age. I've managed to burn my hand, so if it looks a bit weird. That's not any kind of occult significance. Yeah.
Got you, Troy. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to a very, very, very special episode of Divulgence. I have two very special guests here today to talk about some very special stuff. So let's get it underway. First, we have another returning champ. I love talking to this guy. I think there's going to be a lot more chats with us in the future. He's done some awesome books on Saturn death cult. He talks a lot of interesting stuff. Other than that, we've talked about movies, Kubrick. We've seem to have a ever-growing list of stuff to start checking off, and I'm very excited. Please help me welcome Troy McLachlan. Hey, Troy, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Had a great time last time we spoke, and hopefully here we go again.
Yeah, I think this is going to be great because today we also have another gentleman who I love talking to. We just met a few weeks back. Things are growing great, and he also has a podcast that personally I'm just coming to love. It's called Wake the Dead. I've listened to a few episodes here and there, and now it's literally coming to a point where at some point during the day I got to throw on some Wake the Dead. So please help me welcome Sean McCann. Sean, hey. How are you, brother?
Thank you for having me. And yeah, the last one was great. We had a great little conversation about the same topic we're talking about today. And I am very happy to be here with Troy McLachlan as well. I listened to you years and years ago, Red Ice Radio, learning about your Saturn death cult book and the various ideas that you had. They were very interesting to me, and I'm honored to be here with you today. So thank you, Jordan, for
likewise.
Facilitating.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both. Personally, I really wanted to get you guys together. When I found out, Sean, that you were a fan of Troy, I thought, okay, you're going to want to get in. And based on the conversation me and Troy had, I knew that he's interested and hungry for more. So I thought it was a no-brainer just to get us all together and kind of light the wick and get things going. I honestly don't know where we want to begin. I know we have a lot of topics. We're going to talk about Kubrick and movies and a lot of big world concepts and a lot of stuff that you guys talk about and I'm sure Troy writes about. So do either of you have kind of a starting topic or a starting block? Or I mean, it's kind of a free-for-all until the snowball starts rolling, I guess.
Well, I guess
do it, Sean.
Since Troy made the gesture, I'll take over.
He's throwing you the ball.
All right. So I guess I did a lot of work on Kubrick, and when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I did photography. And college, I went to photography. I learned fine art photography. So that was really my focus, and learning about symbolism in work to put ideas into still images was very important to me. And I was learning as much as I could, and I was in awe of Kubrick. Just because, each movie is, a million still pictures in a row, and every shot is a perfect photograph. And he started as a photographer, as a kid. His dad taught him photography, and then he also, and his photography and chess. And that's kind of what created the mind, which made these amazing films. I had an affinity for that, and I've always had the films on. I'll have them on while I'm doing something else, or I'll take certain theogenic substances and, and watch the movie with a different eye, and I've learned a lot. And over the years of watching as many movies as possible, that was a lot of my life. And Kubrick is telling us about being human. He's more than just a filmmaker. He's an artist, and a real artist uses the medium to communicate humanity to the viewer, and then the viewer can relate to the artist through this other way than speaking, and so he's doing that, and he's talking about being a human and having the urges of the beast within, and also power structure and how power operates, and what slavery is, and mental slavery and mind control, and state power and military, and all of these huge ideas that teach us about living in this hell that we are in. and he's giving it all to us. It's a gift, you know, so to help us to understand this world we're in. And I think an Eyes Wide Shut, I would say, is his best work. And he saved it for last. He was going to do Eyes Wide Shut right after
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Dr. Strangelove, I think.
There's a
or
lot of
after
points where he wanted to
2001.
do it, right? But he
Mhm.
kept
Right.
kind of
putting
waiting.
it off and putting it off. And I think that's because he kept learning more,
Yeah.
adding more.
Yeah.
The more you work and think about it, the more it, you know, contemplation happens. And like, because if you're putting out a movie like Michael Bay, like, oh, crank it out, you know, more explosions, like,
Yeah,
you don't have to
dude.
think.
Cookie cutter.
Right? Yeah. Like he's a like, I mean, he's a genius IQ, and the longer time that he spends absorbing all this information, he, like, it's distilled. Like, I think Room 237 put it really good when they said that he's distilling all of this information for us, you know. And that's what a good artist does. All artists, I mean, really should be doing that, you know, expressing their inner, you know, what the message that they have to tell other humans, you know. Anyway, I don't mean to go
I absolutely agree.
out
No,
there,
I
but
absolutely agree. Yeah. I think
Thank
just
you.
a
Yeah.
side note, something I always think about is like who the effect of Operation Mockingbird and the influence of outside influences, right?
Mhm.
And obviously it seems that that's something that Kubrick was definitely trying to avoid and combating against. So you
Yes.
just think about these other geniuses in their own right, so to speak, and there's they stay implanted in that environment physically, mentally,
You mean in Hollywood?
spiritually. Yeah.
And how, like, he escaped to England? Is that
yeah,
right?
just, I mean, that concept on its own, but just, you know, he always seemed to be putting up a fight with networks or the industry in some shape or form. They're always giving him a hard time, right?
I think that any director that is putting up a fight with Hollywood is a good director. I mean, look at Terry Gilliam is like the epitome of people who fight with Hollywood. I mean, he can't make a movie. They won't let him. And I think all of his movies are genius. Like, he's a perfect artist. He's hilarious too.
Sorry, what's his name?
Terry Gilliam.
Oh, okay, that sounds.
He was in Monty Python.
Yeah,
I'm sure Troy.
The Soul American in the Monty Python
the
circus,
American
flying
yeah,
circus.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
Oh, he did Brazil.
He was
those great
12
animations.
Monkeys. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Brazil. There was a masterpiece. It's like 1984.
Yeah.
What if 1984 was a comedy? That's how he described it.
Yeah, interesting. Okay,
it's great. And so every one of his movies you should watch. And he does also. He uses a wide lens, so everything is in focus and allows you to see it all and get the texture. Like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a good example. Like, the wide angle lens and the distortion,
lots
and
of on
the
highway
color
and stuff.
too. He's really good with. Anyway, he's a great artist, and Hollywood hates him. Like, if you learn the story of like Baron von Munchausen.
Oh shit!
Okay, holy, they all disaster happened, and it was like he barely made the movie. He tried to do Man of La Mancha, Don Quixote, and he like couldn't get funding, and they had to postpone it. Then his actor died. Like, it was just doomed to fail. Like, it was cursed, So, but he's still like cranking out amazing movies. Like Zero Theorem is one that he did just recently.
Okay.
And that is a masterpiece. Oh my God. It must be seen. And like the way that Gilliam describes the future is spot on. Everything is trash, graffiti. Everybody's wearing plastic. They're at a club with each other dancing, but they're like looking at their iPads, It's really, it's silly and funny, but it's like not in your face. He's just a great artist, and he's teaching you about like this, like his struggle as a human in this environment of slavery. We are like in a mental cage, being held as kept animals by satanic pedophiles, basically. I don't know if Gilliam got that far with it, but that's reality. Like, we got these people that say they own us and rule us or whatever. They're the worst of the worst. And Kubrick was telling us that Eyes Wide Shut is a revelation of that. He's saying, here it is, but y'all aren't going to see it. keep your eyes wide shut, you idiots. Like, because like nobody wants to see. Like in the end, Ziegler is like, oh yeah, what if it's all fake?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Just
that gives
charade.
it gives you the idea, the plausible deniability,
Yeah.
and then you choose to believe a lie. That's what he does. He saw everything with his own eyes, and then he chooses to believe the lie, like much like 9/11, much like everything else that's been going on. They give us false flags. What if it's all fake?
Yeah,
And
man.
that's how they do it. That's like ever since 2001, that's the MO. They give us this thing that could be fake, could be real. Everybody fights about it, and then they steal all the gold from under the, Twin Towers,
Yeah.
I mean,
BlackRock gold,
it's
baby.
easy. Yeah. And BlackRock and Vanguard are owned by Rothschild. It's like, and Ornate or, Orsini and like these papal families, like these fucking, excuse my language. I don't know. But
No, man,
anyway,
don't worry about it.
it's this, we are under total control, and they own our, like he was saying, like Troy was saying in your last episode, they've been working for hundreds of years to control our finances, and that's to control us. Basically, they want to, like,
Yeah.
we're cattle to them. And so if they can, yes, right. And if they can control our money system, this talisman that we have to be a slave for this paper, so that others will be mind controlled to do what you want. It's this really messed up system. But
that's
anyway,
how they
like,
control Terry Gilliam. It's the
Right.
finance.
yeah,
And they
exactly.
imagine Terry Gilliam starting out today with the access that this generation has to filmmaking equipment, editing processes,
And the computer,
the
right?
computer, all that kind of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it boggles my mind. And I was born in '66 and grew up at a time where to get hold of a camera was like, that was broadcast quality, whether it were video or film, was something that required a lot of pull or a lot of finance.
Right.
And
to edit it, like, to when it's magnetic tape,
editing film, or the old magnetic tape days.
Yeah.
No,
That
I
takes a
started
lot of
out in
work,
film
pain.
where it was that sort of process where a bunch of film students all gathered together and somehow hope some magic is going to happen. And that's one of the reasons why I warmed to Kubrick, because he was boss on his show.
Right.
And I learned that really the best filmmakers are the ones where the films are director driven, not producer driven.
Right.
And Kubrick, Kubrick's very similar to my experience working in the Hong Kong film industry. It's a totally director-driven film industry. The producers get on board because the director is there, not the other way around. In Hollywood, it's the guys with the money who put together the deals and so on like that.
Exactly.
But yeah, with Gilliam and Kubrick, they were two examples of men who followed a vision according to what they wanted to do rather than what the market, they were told the market accepted. Right. The only other guy I can really, for my own personal sort of, love of the filmmaking world, the art of filmmaking and so on, is I put Werner Herzog in the same bracket as those guys. The German, not quite the same consistency of high standards, but films that absolutely influenced, major names like Coppola and, so it doesn't quite come to mind. Who was the other guy? Lucas.
Lucas.
And so on. These guys were, Werner Herzog was the man who, gave me the idea of the film as a journey into something, as a way of exploration. And, I was saying to Jordan in our last interview, a lot of people don't realize that his breakthrough film, which was The Wrath of God, was shot on a stolen camera. He nicked a camera from I think it was a Frankfurt film school or something, took it to Brazil and made a movie with it. It's that kind of approach of it will be done according to the way my vision dictates it. And so
a real artist will put that square peg into that round hole somehow. You got to get that idea, crank it into something, make it a thing. It's tough.
Whereas a lot of people approach filmmaking and think that somehow the magic happens by just gathering names or gathering types of people together. You got to have that single vision that
Right.
acts like the rudder of any boat that
That's right.
that sails now.
Yeah, and his only movie that didn't have single vision was Spartacus, and he hated that. He was
Yes.
so mad at
Yeah.
that, that whole production.
Well, he had his hands tied a lot, right?
That's true. And he
So-
wasn't
He
the original
did.
director. He was like
Exactly. Yeah.
brought in later, and that whole thing.
So, Jordan, remember we spoke about Spartacus, and I mentioned
Yes.
his connection. That if you look at the early connection, the first big major star that Kubrick was involved with, both in Paths of Glory and Spartacus, is Kirk Douglas.
Right.
Have you Sean? Do you have anything that you've heard about that relationship that points to subsequent?
I've heard that Kirk Douglas got mad about Spartacus, and he was mad at Kubrick ever since.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always wondered if Kubrick saw the face of Hollywood, the dark side of Hollywood through Douglas.
Right. Well,
particularly,
I've heard rumors, but I can't be sure that Dr. Strangelove, the guy Peter Sellers, is like a debaucherous person who had lots of,
Why is he keep working with it? Like at first when I started getting into this, I'm like, okay, he's worked. Okay, Ryan O'Neal. Okay, and then it's like, okay, well,
no,
him
he
too.
was forced.
Okay, and then him. So it's
he
like
was forced into Ryan O'Neal.
Okay.
Ryan O'Neal,
but I'm still seeing a pattern
Ryan
here
O'Neal
of
raped
him
his daughter.
dealing with some
Ryan O'Neal
shady
raped
characters.
Vivian.
So,
Ryan O'Neal was supposed to narrate Barry Lyndon,
right,
and he got sent home because
and we spoke about that.
Yeah, he had sex with Vivian, who was 12 years old, who thought she was in love with him, and he did that. And I mean, in Kubrick's home, like he moved away from Hollywood to get his family away from that evil. It's evil.
So
and
him aside, though,
what Ryan O'Neal did to his own daughter is evil.
Yeah, Tatum. Yeah.
Oh, so and Channing Tatum was friends with Vivian.
Channing Tatum.
I think that was her name. That's a guy name.
Tatum. Yeah.
That's the guy's name,
Channing
right?
Tatum.
So
it's Channing Tatum.
What was the
Tatum
daughter?
O'Neal.
Tatum O'Neal. I'm sorry, you guys.
Love it.
So like Tatum O'Neal was friends with Vivian.
Right.
She would hang out, and Vivian thought that she was a woman and could do that. Obviously, I mean, I don't know. I can't speculate what she was thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know what she was thinking.
But it's possible there was some.
No, but there was like it was written in her book. Tatum O'Neal wrote a book, and
was it a biography? Did you say it was?
It was an autobiography. She wrote about
her
herself.
or her the death. Oh, okay.
Herself and her what happened. She didn't really. You got to kind of. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but Kubrick didn't want to work with that dude. They sent him. They sent
because they give him a short list,
rat
right?
into his nest, right? They did. They gave him like a list of like 5.
And I think it was us that were saying like maybe they just gave him a freaking short list of pedophiles, and they're like, okay,
yes,
well, I gotta pick one, I guess.
Yes,
O'Neal was hot stuff at the time. He'd come off
Right.
Love Story, so he was the
Love
he
Story.
was the Hollywood golden boy at that moment.
right.
So,
And he did that film with his daughter there, like Over the Moon or something. And then now she's famous and going to Studio 54, and like it's gross. And then later in life, he's like in these celebrity rehab TV shows. It's sick, and he wants people to feel bad for him. Like somebody should hit him in the head with a fucking
Hollywood's worst dad.
Yes.
Down.
Yeah.
Going back to Kirk Douglas, I said to Jordan that it was Jordan. I mentioned that it's only sort of now been not confirmed yet, but people are coming out about it now that Douglas has passed away.
Yes,
he lived to 102 or something. But the rape of Natalie Wood was in the works at about the time that Kubrick was working with Douglas. Kirk Douglas is probably the epitome of the Hollywood creature on on that side of the camera. He was a moneymaker. Everything he touched turned to gold. So you have that kind of power with the studios and so on. He was able to sort of do virtually anything he wanted. And I mentioned to Jordan, even you can look at images with Bridget, Bardot, frolicking with a 14-year-old. How old was she? 14? She might have even been as young as 12 at the time or something. But there's Douglas frolicking and being all overly familiar with a very young Bridget Bardot. And his own biography of his time in Hollywood is a testament of a man who, you know, is the worst you can think of in terms of the classical, you know, Lothario who beds whatever he likes and can get away. You know, that whole image that was being built in the 1940s, right up to the end of the 1970s, before
and
it
then
started
you had
down.
you had the James Bond being pushed also, like in the 50s, that they, you know, that he could kill without morality. He could have any woman he wants. Like
Peter Sellers.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to try and work the Bond thing in the sense that not in film world, but there is a theory that Ian Fleming, who wrote the Bond books, was he was sort of like 2IC in MI6 during the Second World War. He was the real deal MI6 himself.
He was,
and did he write his books on the principle, because he was hindered by a thing that they have in the UK called the Official Secrets Act? Did he fictionalize to publicize? And there were a number of theories that, for instance, Goldfinger, the famous book, is really a story about how the Rockefellers ripped off the Fort Knox gold and took it out for themselves. And Fort Knox has this shell game where they've got one vault of gold that they show people, but the gold's not there. The films were then subsequently made as a way of turning the Bond character into a cartoon.
Right.
You know,
but it's also
like in the books.
Also, think about the use of it as it's propaganda. Like, I mean, like I was saying, it makes immorality good, and it, like, you know, the bad guy is the good guy, and even though, but he works for the state, so even though the state is bad, that's okay. You know, the state's allowed to kill you via this guy. You know,
monopoly on violence.
Yeah. So, but also, they had this diamonds are forever. You know. The De Beers and the, you know, South Africa and the, you know, the whole British like diamond thing, that whole takeover of that, and that goes along with gentlemen prefer blondes, and that, you know, diamonds are a girl's best friend. They had these like messages, messages, and it was like everywhere. And
because diamonds are not that rare.
No, not at all. But
it's just controlled, you know, sort of industry in terms of its worth.
In SRA, I don't know if you're familiar with satanic ritual abuse, there's levels of like attainment for the slaves, and a diamond level is a sex slave. Marilyn Monroe wore diamonds. The pearls is for mind files, where they do like memory things, and they, you know, and, you know, rubies are for, you know, I think it's like ritual magic or something, like psychic or whatever. But so like the diamond is like the top of the heap. So even though it's not rare in this hierarchy of symbolism, it is like the most attained, like the highest of the best of the presidential model hookers, you know.
Which is, that's interesting, because, you know, Sellers and Kubrick. Sellers goes to make the Pink Panther franchise. The Pink Panther is the diamond. They're all trying to sort of steal out of it. And, you know, you apparently you hold the diamond up to the light, you can see a Pink Panther in it. That's the that's
Jesus
the
Christ.
McGuff, you know, that's the
Sex Panther.
You know,
and it's kind of like pink elephants when you're just like wasted or something. You know?
Man,
like, it's just your imagination. Like, it's valuable.
Troy, sorry, to go back to, you're talking about Fleming, so and Goldfinger and whatnot. So that's another good topic to get into, like another day, is Fleming, because during the war and just in general, he's wrapped up in spy stuff with Crowley and all sorts of characters, right? But to your question about like, is he doing what I think? What did you say? Is he publicizing, fictionalizing to publicize,
like a revelation of the method?
I would say he very likely was, or could have been, because if you go back to my episode on Camp X, which is the secret training camp outside of it's the secret training camp outside of Toronto.
Camp David was the other one, right?
No.
Camp David used to be a secret camp.
This is really Camp X. So this is during the war, and Ian Fleming trained there during the war in Ontario. And that's where he met the guy who wrote the screenplay for Goldfinger. And basically so much of what he saw and did in Camp X is in either Goldfinger, or a lot of it is strewn between the Bond films in general. So I recommend you check that episode out.
He was in the training position, wasn't he? He was like, he was a commander or something, right?
I don't know his title, but in Ontario they had, I forget, I think it's Station M. And that essentially is every Q scene in Bond, where he goes in and he gets all the new gadgets and the new gadgets and cars. Right. So he took that and put it into his movie. So all of that is inspired from World War II in Canada.
If you listen to Richard
Fleming never saw any of the movies. He died before From Russia with Love came out.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, he the Paul Dean, I think, he was also at Camp X, and he wrote the screenplay for Goldfinger, and Goldfinger has so many other similarities to Camp X because it was a training grounds, and Goldfinger has his training, his elite forces that they're training.
And it is a part of the book. But the book and the James Bond persona is so different to the Sean Connery take in the movies. And as I say, they started to cartoonize.
Absolutely.
People have believed that it was a way to actually damp down what Fleming was revealing. His first book, Casino Royale, is actually based on his own personal experiences grabbing a Japanese spy in Macau in the Second World War.
Torturing him.
All this sort of stuff that sort of went on. But when he left, my understanding is that Fleming believed, and this goes to things like the Gemstone File that was very popular in the 1980s and so on, but Fleming believed that the two most dangerous people on the planet were David Rockefeller and Aristotle Onassis, in terms of what was, this kind of shadow government idea. And his books, cast a very different, how can I put it, there's a different atmosphere. Bond is not the ladies' man that the films make him out to be in the books, and it's
socially
Hollywood,
inept.
Baby.
Isn't he socially inept? I mean, he's almost like
he's a cold guy, isn't he?
But he's almost like Manchurian type super soldier.
That's right. He's sociopathic.
Right.
More like Daniel Craig.
Due to all the trauma.
Daniel
that
Craig's Casino Royale is probably the closest to the Bond books that you will ever get.
Right.
Le Chiffre. There's a lot of people saying, speculation that he's based on Aleister Crowley.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it might possibly be, but I haven't sort of read that far. To me, it was just that I learned it about the time that I was learning about Kubrick, and that there was more to his films than Nicole Kidman, standing in the nude and space adventures, to the planet Jupiter. And I was starting to learn more about Kubrick was when I started to also learn this stuff about Ian Fleming, who was writing about stuff he couldn't write about factually, so he fictionalized. And it's sort of, in a sense, kind of created a new genre of expose that wasn't a Roman clef, where you just simply got to change the names and all that sort of idea. But it was sort of these two, cultural moments rooted in the 60s. Kubrick's beginning of his career, Fleming writing his books in the 50s, but they becoming huge in the 60s because of the films. That's sort of when I first started realizing that there are people out there who try to use the tools that have always been in the hands of those who would manipulate society, who would try to control society and so on. Some people have tried to use those tools almost like a double agent effect. And this is sort of where I warmed very much to Kubrick in terms of sort of seeing him in the same light as I started to see maybe Fleming was sort of putting out stuff where you can see a little bit more of what's going on in the world than what we're led to believe, even by writers like John le Carre and other spy genre types and so on. Because there's something about Fleming's books that they stand out on their own in the same way that Kubrick's movies stand out. It like really is worth. Yeah, exactly, because it has that aspect of truth that you can, But I really recommend that people who have developed, James Bond's that character epitomized by Connery. What's his name?
Roger Moore has Roger a lot
Moore
of comedic. He was the most comedic, I think. So he definitely took a spin on it. Yeah, man.
Yeah. And read the books, because it was
I've
a
been
revelation
wanting
to
to
me.
get Goldfinger,
Yeah.
the book, actually. So
It was a
that's
revelation
interesting.
to me.
You know,
Okay.
Fleming, I've heard from Richard Grove, who did a lot of research into this, that Fleming was put to a test and he failed a test of morality. Like he was told to kill somebody in the back of the head or something, shoot him in the head, and he was like, he didn't. And then ever since they're like, okay, you got a desk job now.
So he's,
And it seems
okay.
like he almost like he craves that adventure of the life that he's not allowed to do anymore.
Yeah.
So like in his imagination, he's trying to fulfill this unfulfilled desire of being this, you know, the perfect soldier
vicariously through
slave.
his book.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's a lot of people, see Bond as some kind of epitome of the Englishman of his era. But in fact, Fleming wrote James Bond as half Scottish and half Swiss, the character.
Oh, okay.
Has his origins as an orphan, but of Scottish and half Swiss. It didn't stop him from, praising Sean Connery when he met him just before he died, saying Sean Connery had the look and everything, but when he opened his mouth, he sounded like a Glaswegian truck driver. Didn't quite sort of, go with the idea.
It's funny.
But
and like Scottish goes to the Freemasonry and to the Knights Templar, possibly. If
I wouldn't be surprised if he was a Mason. Because
well, look, I just pulled
whole
look at his
Oxford
grave
statue,
here.
Yeah.
And Swiss is like, that's where the bankers are and the people, the globalists and all that. Yeah.
There's his grave. So
that's Fleming's grave, is it?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's an obelisk.
It's in Jamaica. No, Wiltshire. Yeah, because he died in Jamaica, didn't he?
I was just looking that up
unexpectedly
on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That's good.
So okay.
So
heart disease. Okay.
Yeah. So I've heard that he didn't pass the test, and that's why he's not as immoral as they needed him to be. And so that now he was in charge of helping to get America back under the wing of Britain. So they had this OSS thing going, and they started.
He wrote a report on how to set up an intelligence agency because, the Brits have been running an intelligence agency since the days of Francis Drake. The Americans just had no real idea of how an intelligence agency operated. He wrote the initial document, and they ignored it completely. His idea was you recruit guys who have great language skills and people who just blend into the background. They have no charisma, nothing. Those make the perfect spies, according to the old school way. CIA seemed to go more with the go-getting, Ivy League boy who was sort of more on his parents' money and connected into that.
Well, when I think of that, I think they wanted to have the SRA victims be the one in the reins of power, because like the people, those families are generational Satanists. They abuse their children to fracture their mind, to make them psychopathic. Sure. It's a system, like when you get that frame of reference, it makes more sense as to what they're doing and why. Like, so that's like the Ivy League, like the Skull and Bones and stuff. Those are for the families that work for the families, so it's like a place where they're allowed to breed with each other, and it keeps the bloodlines clean. And of course the initiation into the dark orders. And
a study of the Renaissance in Italy, particularly Venice, shows exactly the same playbook. With the aristocratic class and so on.
Venice moved to England,
first to Amsterdam. That's the incredible thing. They always seem to have this love of swampy places, where there's Babylon.
They've got they're the maritime law, so that's what has ruled. Like Phoenicia, then like the Phoenicians, then the Venetians, and then the Amsterdam with their and it's all finance and speculation and mind control and slavery.
And it's interesting that the two most important, what I would call occult influences, which goes beyond the sort of the Satanist idea, but they operate out of the city-state.
Yes, yes.
Sort of comes. So you've got the Vatican with its, with its Black Pope and
Yes.
the Jesuits and so on. You have the City of London that is a entity in its own right. And Washington, D.C. has been set up exactly that way. And it's basically the violence arm of this network that we're talking. Religion out of the Vatican, money out of the City of London through Wall Street, and Washington is, basically you get killed if you don't play the game the way we want you to.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier the blackmail that they do. The Catholic Church has been doing that. They've been taking confessions.
Yeah.
This is like they work on blackmail ever since the beginning, and
Totally.
the child rape and SRA is part of it too. That's how they keep their hierarchical structure of obedience populated.
Yeah, when they were supreme, when the Catholic Church did everything, the popes that they had running around at that, during the years preceding the Reformation,
right?
And so on, the power that these people had, to give one example so people understand that this is in context what we're talking about. You had one pope who was known at the time to be filleted by young boys under his gown as he sat on the throne of Peter.
Yeah.
And so on. And he loved to do it almost as a sort of like, guess what? He didn't do it for the pleasure for himself, but just because he could do it.
Yeah.
This is the level.
And it fractures the boy. It like,
totally.
It harms his sense of self, his like, it ruins the mind of the child. And and the monsters that are accepting the, in quotes, pleasure from these poor children are, they don't run on the pleasure, like they get the pleasure from the domination.
Rape. Rape is about domination, not sexual
power, baby.
Gratitude. Yeah.
And that goes back to the idea of 2001 when the ape destroys that skull and then he kills the tapir and then eats the flesh that's totally dominating another being, and that's where, and then he skips all the way to the future because everything in between is just a bunch of violence. Like, it's all the same.
It's all the same. Yeah.
Same process. Yeah. From a biblical point of view, it's, that's the essence behind the murder of Abel by his brother Cain.
Yeah.
And such. So you've got the same sort of theme on, the sort of the real old time mythologies, all have these sort of this basic idea of a descent into violence as a way of pursuing, your, need to control others in the way that the creator God archetype had control. It is violence, and it can come in, it's either state violence or personal violence.
Yeah.
So, the Minotaur tale. Jordan, we were talking about this with, the surrealists and their love of the Minotaur story and some of the murders that happened in the 40s and 60s in that realm. A lot of people don't realize that art, the surrealists and the Dadaists and so on, they were the punk rockers of that era, doing crazy stuff. And the dismembering of women and so on like that, hailing
Man
it back
Ray.
to Man Ray, all these guys and so on, that Duchamp, these guys,
urinal,
signed the urinal, all that sort of stuff. And that, you might have read, what's it called? Exquisite Corpse, which looks into the connections between surrealist symbology.
Black Dahlia.
The Black Dahlia, yeah. And that whole sort of hand up like that, signifying the kind of horns of the bull.
It's also a Masonic symbol for distress.
Yeah.
When somebody is in distress, they put their hands up, and another Mason will recognize that, and that's why cops. That's why you do it to police officers, because they're built on masonry.
Right. Shows that there's something they can understand. Right. With regards to the Minotaur and so on, it's that sort of idea that becomes distilled, that life is a labyrinth we walk, hoping never to run into violence. And the Minotaur becomes that aspect of what happens when you turn the wrong corner in life and you become a sacrifice to, this god of violence.
Yeah.
And, this is really, if there is a labyrinth in the world, it's the one that Kubrick does seem to have decided to not live amongst, and that's Hollywood. Hollywood is a labyrinth for people who go there with stars in their eyes and end up in all kinds of problems.
I feel so bad for all of those actors and singers and all. I mean, it's their fault for choosing to be there, but like look at poor Bieber, he's got his face is falling apart, and they like injected him with this poison, and he like doesn't even recognize that he's being attacked, and he's like talking. I mean, and he started as a little kid, and
exactly.
Of course he was one of the SRA. Of course that he's an SRA, and they put him on YouTube, and they made it like, oh, YouTube, you can become famous on YouTube also. Just sing like a TikTok.
Same sort of idea, and so that's that goes back to the idea about multi-generational families,
right?
I mean, you can see the multi-generational families in the big names in Hollywood, whether it's the Fondas, the Douglases. There's that sort of aspect to it, and there's always inevitably, and there's always some kind of connection either back to the New England aristocracy,
right,
the Mayflower aristocracy, or
Tuesday Weld
military intelligence. Yeah,
right.
David Crosby out of Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Oh yeah, Dave
Guys,
McGowan's
they're all-
work. Dave McGowan's work of the weird scenes inside the canyon.
Seminal stuff.
Yes.
If to understand what's going on in our era, I can't recommend a better book than Program to Kill and Laurel Canyon.
Yeah, they're integral for understanding what is really going on. Mind control, and the Program to Kill, those people are SRA.
Totally.
They were used as super soldiers in Vietnam. They had just learned these tactics from right after when they got all these Nazis from
Operation Phoenix was practiced in Vietnam as a forerunner and unleashed on America.
Evil, exactly.
Well, McGowan is the guy that connected something to me that I'd read a book called A Plague of Murder by the British philosophical writer Colin Wilson. He'd done it in connection with another author whose name escapes me, but they went into this idea of why the sudden incredible explosion of serial killing in the United States, in the Western world, since the Second World War. And he went through all of this sort of stuff and it was Colin Wilson sort of tracked the developments to, people with psychopaths, head injuries, things like that, certain families that they seem to come out of, things that happen in their life at the beginning. And so Dave McGowan took that further and absolutely convinced me that I believe the majority of serial killing, particularly in the United States, is organized.
Yes.
It's not the lone wolf guy running around, and they purposefully
just like the school shootings, by the way.
Yes. Well, that's just the next, the serial killers become
it's just
passe.
the new generation of the same old thing.
Serial killers are passe. Had its day with Anthony Hopkins and Hannibal Lecter and so on. That was the last thing.
He was a much more theatrical killer guy.
He was.
James Holmes is like a retard, like just drooling on himself.
That's right. Yeah, well, what's that Hannibal Lecter character is what the James Bond character from the movies is to espionage and so on. The idea of the super intelligent, in control psychopath.
Yes.
And that is just not.
They engender that. They create that with trauma. Like if they can traumatize the youth as early as they can, then the mind doesn't grow any compassion. It doesn't function that way.
Exactly.
And it just blooms in the intelligence of left brain intelligence, and immorality intelligence.
I was going to say that Dave McGowan highlights in particular how they downplay the satanic elements surrounding particular serial killing cases, like what's going on in that neighborhood, what the reports are, what's happening, and so on. And that's simply because, once again, the satanic panics of the 1980s and so on, that can be summed up. The McMartin child case at the school there. And they said, what a load of rubbish. They said it's all false memory syndrome and so on. And then it turned out most of those kids had chlamydia.
It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah. They found a Disney plastic bag under the school in a tunnel. There was a tunnel that was filled in with dirt. Yeah. And it was like a bag from Disney World or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's proven, but the people that control the story
Yeah.
You know, those are the ones, the Satanists are part of the club. You know, you're not going to get the truth.
Well,
You got to
hopefully
dig
one
for
day
it.
we'll do a bit of ground penetration radar work on Epstein's Island, and just
Right.
see,
Ooh.
what's sort of happened in there
Yeah.
and such. How do you
That's a
feel
good
about
idea.
the news that it's come out about Maxwell in prison? She's
Can you
her
update us on that?
prison. Apparently, a cellmate has revealed that she was offered money to kill her.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
this
didn't
is
hear
in the
that.
last
That must have been happening
24
today.
hours.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't hear that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
I heard
it's
that she
apparently
wanted
come
to be
out.
moved to England jail instead of U.S. jail, and of course she does because she's friends with the Queen. You
Wow.
know?
Of course, yeah.
So, but I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Somebody
apparently the technique was to strangle her.
right. Well, that's
That's
how
what
they
they
do it. That's I was actually in jail when Father Gagan was killed, and somebody snuck into that part of the prison. It was a segregated block for people that are highly, protected custody, they're called. And they're only let out for 1 hour a day, and only one is allowed out at a time. You know what I mean? So they're always alone. And so they let somebody in there to kill that dude.
Yeah.
And because he was connected to the Catholic hierarchy,
Okay.
and he could have spilled some beans, and they just got rid of him,
Yeah.
And
I don't think people realize
Spilling the beans.
prominent, how strong the Catholic Church still is in terms of geopolitical affairs.
Oh, absolutely.
They run the Rothschilds. You know what I mean? Like everybody says the Rothschild, but they're Vatican bankers. The Vatican runs, and if you look at BlackRock and Vanguard, Rockefeller is on the name of like the people that own it, but also Orsini and some other papal families. Like this is like there's higher up that people don't see, and the Catholic Church they've been on top for the last how many 4,000 years, like
not 4,000.
3,000. Yeah.
By the time Napoleon took the crown from the Pope and placed it on his own head, which basically broke the Catholic Church's hold over that side of things.
But then Rothschild broke Napoleon, and Rothschild worked for the Vatican.
Yeah, but you see, the interesting thing there for me is that what changed was control via the threat of excommunication, the religious control, and it moved towards the idea of control through finance.
Right.
Now, the Catholic Church had always been part of that when they discovered that the world was a globe and so on, and they realized that it didn't go out like a disc, where it would just expand forever and ever. Yeah. And they realized, therefore, that land resources were finite. Their last gasp. So 1,260 years, the Catholic Church held absolute sway over the European scene. And it started to break once the Reformation and the colonization of South America, the bringing back of gold and so on. Spain became a totally dependent on gold imports, which destroyed its economy and allowed the Protestant nations, the Dutch and the English, to sort of come up into that. And so what you're saying, sort of like the idea that the Vatican realized that money was now more important than I can stop you getting into heaven. That was basically what changed at around about the time of Napoleon and so on.
Right. I mean, it's a different tactic of mental slavery, really. Yeah. Because it's just like it's a paper talisman. Yeah. You can, and even if you just assign it to a rock or like gold or whatever, it's just a rock, really. It's the mind control that it takes. If I want to take over your will, I can use this magic thing, this magic talisman that somebody else gave me because I was a slave for them for a while, and they gave me this thing. Now you be a slave for me for a while. It just kind of goes down and trickles down, as it's all slavery.
Manipulation tool. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. I mean,
there is no doubt that the Catholic Church has all the symbolism from its Babylonian roots.
Right.
It's much castigated book is called, Bullinger was the guy, I think, who wrote it. Why it's escaped my memory. Two Babylons. All right.
Hislop. All right. Alexander Hislop.
That's the one. And Two Babylons has been castigated for little wee details here and there when the book was written before the full archaeological evidence was coming out. But it is absolutely no doubt that the prime symbols of the Catholic Church, from their Dagon worshipping mitres that they wear on their head to a lot of the others, the color choice, all these sorts of things.
Cybele also.
All goes back to Babylon.
Right.
And such, so that financial control that comes.
Right. Yeah. And that relates to Eyes Wide Shut.
Totally. That's the best
they were
thing
doing. They were doing the fertility ritual from the Ishtar.
And the fact that he chose Ishtar shows to me that Kubrick knew more than the average garden variety Satanist.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
He went much further back, where you can look at Satanism as a kind of a trend in what I call Saturn worship. Right. All the way down the line. It's kind of the latest one.
The Moloch, fires of Moloch, and the sacrifice of children is Satanism. It's just like, it's a more ancient, like the current LaVeyan Satanism is like kind of a theatrical thing to gather. Yeah. It's like an aggregator for people that are immoral, so they can pick them up and put them in places of power. It's like it's the same way. So they're trying to find all the psychopaths. Really, that's all that one.
And it works for these people to get them in that way, and then they can initiate them up higher. The 5-pointed star, you don't stop there. The 8-pointed star is, is higher up in the hierarchy, and so on.
The Tesseract is like total mind control. The 8-pointed star is like, it's a 2-dimensional representation of the Tesseract, which represents the mind cage of and also like the realm, this hell that they think we're in a hell put here by the demiurge, like that whole thing.
And that this is one of the things that I've learned since publishing the Saturn Death Cult. I've republished it in a revised form in the last 4 years. But the reason I did so was because I came across the book, The Game of Saturn, which gives the documented evidence of a connection between ancient Saturn worship and the modern world via the Renaissance family of the Estes and the tarot cards that they were involved in. And, it was there that you learned that in the difference between, the Christian and even the satanic idea that people associate to witchcraft and so on like that, compared to the Saturn worship, is the difference between understanding the concept of a doomsday and the concept of a judgment day. Christianity is all about a righteous God judging us at a future time, depending on how we lived our lives. And many satanic sort of orders and that, they follow the similar kind of principles in the sense that they're trying to legally forestall such a judgment day. Right. Saturn worship is an entirely different concept. It's about a capricious God who may wake up one day and go to hell with it. I'm getting rid of the whole of society. I'm getting rid of creation, starting it again. There's no logic behind it. Yeah, right. There's no logic behind it. There's nothing there. All you need to do is that if you've got a God like that, you've got to get into the act of trying to be influential so that when he does have a bad day and decides to wipe out creation, he might let you survive, depending on how your influence is. And this
but
is
it's not based on morality if he lets you survive.
It's not based on morality one little bit. It's based on influence.
Yeah.
And such. Right?
And like your power over others, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. And of course, what I also learned from the book there, I was like anybody, you're at your wit's end trying to figure out why would people debauch and even murder babies as part of some sort of way to get ahead in the world. All right. There is that aspect of that is so beyond the normal mind in terms of how one would behave. And in Game of Saturn, there was a question was answered, and that was quite simply that they have the belief, right or wrong, whatever it is, but it works in a certain way that if they commit these rituals, it guarantees them to either continue to be reborn into a certain bloodline, an established bloodline, or if you are not part of the established bloodline, this explains why people who are outside of the major families will get involved in this. It means that you will be born in your next incarnation into a higher up bloodline and such, and become part of that scene. This is what This is what they are attempting.
Is that why Jacob the Rothschild and Marina Abramovich stand in front of a painting Satan summoning his minions? Is that like, are they saying, are they, because they flaunt how evil they are?
Yes, absolutely. And the symbolism is all there in their parties and so on, you know?
Right. And it's telling the other Satanists, look how evil I am so elite because I've been here through this many generations. And
precisely. And if you follow what I do, which gives the blackmail material for the people being brought in and so on, or at that lower order. Right. But, for most of us that would rebel at the thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, kill a baby just to become influential with you. But if you start believing in the Greek reincarnationist ideas that became part of the Western sort of religion in opposition to the resurrectionist ideas of ancient Egypt, if you become part of that reincarnated idea, the temptation to be involved in something like that, the reward is you'll be born into my family or higher up the ladder in lesser families than you are now. If you just, Mr. Brown, who comes off the street and says, I'll do anything to make it. It's not going to happen in your life, but you can engineer, you can influence the supreme creator God, who has this, what do you call it? It's, this capricious nature about him. You can engineer it to be favored that when you are reincarnated, you end up in a better bloodline. And that's what they're dangling in front of these people.
So do you think that's because in their mind, they see this as hell, and instead of progressing out of this place into unity with the oneness, they want to stay in division, separated from God in this place that
they do. At the lowest level, the psychology involved is like a gang with a particularly nasty gang leader running the guys, right? Extremely violent Satan. Guy. Yeah, everybody is worried. Everybody is worried when this guy walks in. He can go off at any moment on anybody.
Right.
Try and be the person that he's not going to go off on by influencing him. The way to do that is to engage in Machiavellian politics, where you're setting cliques against cliques, and hopefully it works out for you depending on how you work that way. Well, this is a spiritual version of that based on a rejection of, and I can use the Greek origins and the biblical origins. In the biblical origins, God creates a world and declares it is good. In the Greek world, Kronos creates a world which is where material is actually fundamentally bad. And so the individual is always looking for that spiritual advancement to get out of the material world, which is evil inherent. And that's
like the Cathars. The
Cathars are of that line. And really it just boils down to, in terms of the old mystery schools now, are you a resurrectionist or are you a reincarnationist? This is what it actually boils down to, irrespective of the Buddhist influence and the Hindu influence and so on like that. In Egypt, they were resurrectionists. That's why they buried their kings and tried to preserve them as mummies and so on. All right. But they tried to take their money with them. They had this interpretation, I'll wake up and I've got all my slaves. They were murdered here, and here's my wealth and I'll do well in the next world. And
also like in China, they had the terracotta.
They were resurrectionists originally.
Yeah.
But whereas a reincarnationist is just simply
like a Buddhist or something.
They'll
get a new body, a new try again.
Except with these guys, it's the game of, it's not enough to just be reincarnated into something better or worse. So the Buddhist idea of that, if you can descend right down to being a cat
or like a dung beetle.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the Greek idea is, which family are you going to work towards becoming a member of in your next life? And this explains why people are willing to do evil in this life, the bloodlines. Why it's so important. It's a bribery thing. You can do all this, and if you do these horrible rituals, if you engage in this kind of activity to help us, hey, you'll be rewarded by, when you're born again, you're in the bloodlines.
I've learned as much as I can, about the demon realms, and that they have a hierarchical structure of law where they are in a set frame of obedience, and there is no time.
Mhm.
So they have to, like, it's like instant karma. So they know not
Yeah.
to step out of bounds, but they know what they can do and how they can influence. And
Mhm.
then there's a hierarchical structure for them too. And then the lowest level of them influences the people that do ritual ceremonial magic to
Mhm.
talk to these spirits, and then below them is the hierarchical structure of the humans, you know.
Right.
And it goes from the pope down to the, you know, the cardinals and bishops, kings, down to, you know, knights
Yeah.
and
This is very
serfs.
much the heritage of, you know, the what you find in Greek mythology, the domination, you know, all the sort of stuff that you see happening within Greek into Roman mythology is very much along these lines. And really what you're talking about is the essence of what it is to be satanic. A lot of people just think being satanic is, you know, getting up and I'm going to go murder a baby. I'm going to go and, you know, be a serial killer, or I'm going to go and, you know, do something,
Those are the symptoms.
desecrate a Bible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being satanic means being adversarial in a legalistic way. All right. So when you first in the biblical tradition,
That's
the first
literal
time in the oldest
with
books.
the Jewish words is the Satan means the adversary in a legal court. Right?
That's exactly what it is. So the Satan talking to God in the book of Job, where you first get your first introduction to this, he's not sort of an anarchist. He's actually trying to use the existing laws to prove a point that is adversarial to the aims of, first of all, Job, but mainly of God, the God figure, to produce somebody who is, you know, sort of righteous in the eyes of God's law. So they always use this whole obsession with opposite sort of ways of doing things, but within the law.
The mirror.
The mirror, words spelled backwards, taking laws that fulfill the letter of the law so that they can achieve something that is against the plan or will of God.
Right.
And so on. We find that in Hollywood, a lot of people are cottoning onto this idea of being warned. You know, this idea that you must warn people before you go to war with them. And if you warn them and they don't take up the thing, the surrender, you can now do whatever you like to them. Hey, we warned them. We made films. We showed them stuff.
Yeah,
but
that's an occult. That's an occult law. I think it's titled Mansreya or something. I forget. And that, like, if you don't object, then you agree. So,
that's right.
And if you agree, then we don't have a karmic repercussion. So,
and in the West, our fundamental biblical thing is that silence is not, you know, acquiescence. To remain silent, all right, is not agreement. That was written fundamentally. But even the Catholic Church,
but to them it is.
Yes, they change it on that level, and they've created this, you know, this sort of whole idea that once you don't say anything or object, hey, I watched your films, I was entertained by them, and so on, they have free reign to then pursue their particular agendas. Their
agendas of total domination. You know, that's what it ends up being.
It's through this acquiescence and through the power they have and such. But this idea that, you know, Satan is adversarial in a legalistic way and so on, you know, is what the point I'm going to make is that this is why secret societies like Skull and Bones, a lot of people don't realize that Skull and Bones is a rhetorical society in name. That's how it starts off. They practice rhetoric, and the rhetoric is so high up in the sort of satanic occults as a skill, because rhetoric is what you employ to use the letter of the law to get results that the law is not intending to happen.
Right.
All right. So the classic example of the law against homosexuality. All right. If you in the biblical law that you can't have sex with a man as you would with a woman, the adversarial rhetoric way is to say, fine, it says a man. What about a boy? All right. So anybody under 12 becomes game based on that rhetoric because the law says a man.
Yeah. And then Kinsey comes along and then everybody's like, oh, great.
Yeah, that's my next one on your list.
Gross.
There.
Oh man, it's gross, man. Yeah. I gotta anyway, I don't mean to. But this is a very good line of thought that we're traveling down here. You know, it is. I've learned that this spiritual battle is a legal battle.
Yes.
And what, like, God like created the law. Like that is the parameters of reality. That is why
I could
the
just
world is
interrupt you
what
on
it
that
is.
one there.
Please, yeah.
It's not that God created the law.
Right.
And this is often the problem with people who like to visualize God as a guy with a big beard on a throne. And so,
Yeah.
God
Amen.
was the law. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God.
Right.
The Word encompasses the law. So just on a technical detail, God is the law, the written word.
That's what I meant to do. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be written, but it's like it is there to be discovered,
to be
like,
communicated. Yeah.
right. And like, we discover it, and like how morality is objective, we come to that realization. We don't like, you can logically deduce it, and so with that logical understanding, but these people with their abracadabra and their Ouroboros speaking reality into the existence, this is like your words are like a spell, and this creates the reality in someone else's mind.
Yeah.
And their perception is whatever is told to, like, and they accept or they disagree, and that's what this what the court battles are, and that's all the mind control is. If they can speak into your reality, into your mind, what reality should be, it becomes created. And like, what
if they can control your own interpretive faculties,
right?
On a secular scale, George Orwell, the idea of double speak and so on like that, there's that you can get to a stage where snow is white one day, and next day the government tells you it's black, and you're quite happy to go along with that.
Right.
We're living in that world.
Yeah.
There are multiple genders in the human species, but there is no such thing as gender. That's as Orwellian as it gets.
Yeah, that documentary was great, by the way. What is a Woman? Everybody should see that. Like,
I didn't see that.
Oh, it's great. I mean, please, everybody should watch it, even the listeners. But people can't define what a woman is, even though they decide, oh, I feel like a woman. Oh, what is a woman? Oh, what you wear? Like, it's very silly, but to the point where, he's speaking to one person, he mentions, reality, the truth, and the guy in the other chair is angry and wants to leave because he mentioned truth. It's really solipsistic. Like, what the state that the mind of America, well, not just America, but America mostly, but a lot of the world is put into this solipsism where, I mean, he's asking people on the street, he's like, he's a guy with a beard, and he's like, oh, can I be a woman? And people are like, oh yeah, whatever, you be what you want to be. And it's like, I will accept your solipsistic reality if you want me to. There is no truth. And
this idea of my truth is like the Holocaust guy. I can remember one guy who sort of there's a lot of people who've been outed for it's very similar to stolen valor and such, where the Holocaust guy, it turned out he never left the Bronx.
Right.
He claimed and he claimed that he'd been in the camp and so on. But he starts to argue that because it was real in his mind, it therefore is valid. And when you're in that kind of irrational behavior, such but that
if you're not in reality, you can't fit with everybody else. Everybody has to agree on reality. If you don't have that, then it's total chaos. And once the chaos is there, then they can do their alchemy. They've
totally
the blackening, the solve, and then they can coagula some real evil Babylon tower.
And if they control money, which allows them to manipulate authorities and bribes and things like that, it can be a very pleasurable experience, because you then get to experience anything that is taboo. And
past that, then they do the rape and murder of children. They drink the the infused blood with all of the chemicals of the adrenochrome and the other ones too. There's many chemicals that humans are drugs. We create endogenous drugs, and if they tap into that, they have no immorality, they become addicted to it. So like that, it's a tough reality, but I'm glad we all agree to the truth. Like it's there, like we can see it.
Yeah.
It's deduced. They have exposed themselves, and
Yeah.
Kubrick was showing us what Eyes Wide Shut was a revelation, and it's like
Yeah.
this is what nobody sees, and he shows it to us, and then at the end he's like, you can choose to not believe it.
Yeah.
And
Well, see,
then
I didn't know he
Yeah.
was working on that almost immediately after Lolita, because
yeah,
for me, Lolita was the film that really it absolutely told me that Kubrick was. It's simply because of the way he developed the character Quilty in the
right.
story, And Jordan, in our last one, I think I said something about I've sort of come to realize that when the Lolita disappears from the hospital,
Yeah, man.
you could almost believe that she is that victim in Eyes Wide Shut,
Yeah.
that she grows up to be that victim in Eyes Wide Shut at a later date. There's that connection philosophically in what he's exposing to us, that you've got these pedophile rings that operate in feeding procurement rings for elites and so on like that. Yeah. And you telling me that he was onto this Eyes Wide Shut after Lolita, rather than sometime after Full Metal Jacket or whatever like that.
Right.
To me, that was really interesting to find out that he was thinking those lines way back then.
Yeah, it was in his hopper for most of his, a good portion of his
he bought
career.
The rights. Yeah.
There was at one point, I think maybe in the 80s or give or take, I think Steve Martin actually met with him, and Steve Martin was being considered.
It's so perfect.
Dude, it was supposed to be more of a comedy kind of thing. It took many different shapes before it.
Steve Martin was Stanley Kubrick's favorite actor.
Is that right? And he's a guy who's he said
who's The Jerk.
Hollywood, isn't he?
He said The Jerk was one of his favorite movies. Also, Eraserhead is like on top of his list.
Eraserhead, yeah.
And that makes sense. Like Lynch is a genius too.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, but The Jerk is perfect once you understand like where my thesis of Eyes Wide Shut is, like, Bill Harford is the jerk. He's the guy that's totally stupid, doesn't see reality, like stumbling through life, like it fits just perfectly. It's like ironic, like
just told you the babysitter's name, but you don't know the babysitter's
exactly
name.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So, and the Lita, the Quilty character, is like a screenwriter, like and he's working with a high school. He's like famous screenwriter working with a high school, and he's like, and he knew, and he did like sex parties with Lolita's mother, who's like, oh, it's him, yay! Like,
now, correct me if I'm wrong.
And he's got a black witch for a girlfriend, who's like got dark hair, being witchy.
And it was that aspect that Kubrick developed further from Nabokov's book. Right. I don't think it was there in Nabokov's book, the Hollywood connection directly. School plays, yes, that sort of thing. It's the old story. Was it John Dillinger or Legs Diamond? I can't remember. Some bank robber. Why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Why do pedophiles work and it was Dillinger, was it?
Right.
I think so.
Why do pedophiles like to work in schools and teach Sunday school and work
for
in
Disney
foster cares and things like that?
Disney run Disney.
The kids are.
Right. Yeah. And it only makes sense. It's like Velcro to these pedophiles, and then they work with each other in the secret orders to promote each other, and eventually the worst of the worst is on top. Like you can't have a hierarchical structure and not have evil psychopaths climb to the top. Like anytime you see hierarchy, like, I mean, you see my hat and my shirt, I'm an anarchist, all that. Like, I don't believe in authority. I think that there's only mind control. That's all there is out there. And we already live in an anarchist society, or world. But anyway, I don't need to go there. But so if you see hierarchical structures of obedience, that's a evidence of Satanism right there. If somebody gives over their will to someone else, that is black magic. And if they don't use their free will to choose right or wrong, they're already choosing wrong, So
I think this is where the key to that is, where you see that it literally is the practice of ritual.
yeah.
Ritual is, to me, the great, I guess it's the great bane of humanity. That somehow ritual, I totally agree that if you want to be a good golfer, you've got to practice those shots. If you want to, if you that practice is not ritual as such, but the introduction of ritual as control mechanisms within various societies, organizations, particularly institutionalized religious organizations, look for that. When I wrote Saturn Death Cult, and I think I told, this is when I wrote Saturn Death Cult, it was to try and emphasize to people, look for these symbols to know when these rituals are taking place.
Right.
If you can find these symbols, then you know that this institution has that ritualistic element in terms of what it controls and what it seeks to control. Right. So, whether it is government, justice systems, educational systems, right, most definitely institutionalized religions, you can see the symbols are just there. It's one of the reasons why, during the Reformation, the Puritans went over the top with the idea, just get rid of all of the symbols. They wouldn't even have a cross in a church. They wouldn't have anything. They just concentrated on the word as such. When they had the English Civil War, they had that going on in England, and that was feeding into New England and in America. But as soon as the throne was reestablished, the crosses came back in, the ritualistic iconography came back in, and England started back down that path of being controlled by trooping of the color, and if you're going to get married, you're going to make a big deal of it with thousands and thousands of dollars, pageantry. I think a key thing, and
it's like the state took over where the religion used to have the reins. The state was like, okay, now England is now just kind of like the way Rome was before the Pope. They were like, okay, Caesar's your god now, guys. And
in the biblical sort of account where people feed off the Bible to create these institutions, it's actually the opposite. It goes back to this whole idea why I consider kingship almost satanic.
Yes.
Because it couldn't be more clear that the ancient Israelites, in choosing to have a king, were rejecting the word. They were rejecting God.
Right.
All right. That was what was actually stated to the prophet when they came and said, we want a king like everybody else has. All right. And it was like, don't worry, it's not a rejection of you, it's actually a rejection of me, comes the word to the prophet. They were rejecting the word. To try and counter that, it was put down certain laws about kings. All right. And one of the king's laws that you have is that you are not allowed to gather men and equipment to you for forming an army. You are not allowed to take coin, to gather coin. Now, if you look at every king, and particularly even the modern kings of Great Britain, that's what it's been about.
That's what they do, exactly.
The whole opium wars, the way that they ravaged China by selling opium to get the silver. Those guys could only do that with a royal decree. And it wasn't a decree, it was a contract. I forget what they call it now, by royal appointment or something along those lines. Because the Saxe-Coburgs, now known as the Windsors and such, they were destitute. It was the banking families, the Rothschilds and that were holding most of the money. They had land, but they didn't have that. By the way, as well, a king out of the Bible should hold no land. All right. The reason being is that the biblical concept of kingliness is that you act as a judge, and therefore you can't be influenced in your judgments, between a rich man, a poor man, or whatever. You've got to be fair no matter
whatever they can give you.
Yeah. And if you were invested in, the latest opium conspiracy in China and so on, you are not going to judge righteously against those companies that have profited over opium and such. Right? This is the way the British Crown has fallen so low into this, that they are so opposite the concept of kingliness in the Bible. And when you watch, the current queen could die any day now. She's that old. All right, so we're going to have a coronation, and you are going to see a disgusting array of biblical
The Jubilee was already disgusting.
Justifications, we do this in the name of God and all this sort of stuff, right? They're going to do that. They're going to put a crown on their head with a cross on the top. They're going to on Charles's head and so on, if he becomes king. And it is so opposite. When King David attempted to number the men of Israel so he could figure out, if I wanted to invade this other country, how many men am I going to have? That was a stage too far back then for the God of the Bible. He actually said, okay, you've done extreme wrong. You can choose between plague or you can choose between famine in terms of the punishment, you being a representative of what it should be kingly, having done so much wrong. But that's what kings do, and they will want. They will tax you. They will take your young men, put them in wars, and and they will dominate you. And and
when they take the young men, those young men never grow up to be strong fighters of that monarchy. When they're children, they don't recognize they're slaves, and then by the time, if they had stayed home and grown up and raised a family, there would have been this powerful force that might rise up against that authority structure.
And in the biblical thing, it says when you gather the men, when you gather the men forward, it says anybody who's recently married and has a house to build, leave now. You're not part of this conflict. First of all, they say, if you're not into fighting, if you're, to use the term they use, if you're cowardly, we don't want you in the army. So the biblical concept was always to give people that out. So that king's ambition did not overrule what was righteous when it came to fundamental things like conflict and war. Right. This is the basic element of kingship. And yet today's kingship, to a T, whether it's even the other kings like the Thai king and so on, they appeal by saying we're representatives of God. And people swallow this, for God, now, king and country.
And like in the past, they had I can keep you out of heaven, and then I can keep you out of being in a heavenly life on earth by keeping you from getting material goods that you need to be comfortable, with the money situation. And now, but now they want domination, control over our very bodies and our reproductive our DNA and our reproductive ability. And they don't need money to control us anymore if they control our bodies,
if they control the patent to what a human is,
that too, a slave, they can make a legal document that says you're theirs now, just like it was 400 years ago.
And you can't procreate unless we say it's all right or whatever.
Right, because the planet, overpopulation, fossil fuels, it's such retarded false axioms that they've drilled into us over the, and everybody believes.
And then you see what they do as opposed to what they say. Barack Obama buying 2,500 gallons of propane for his beachfront property.
Beachfront. Oh, I thought the ocean was going to rise. What the hell? Micronesia disappeared, right?
And why are you making sure that you survive any recession by having loads of fossil fuel?
Right.
Right.
And it's not even made out of fossils. It's rock oil, it's silly. So, those kind of, that's they when they have the narrative and the television, and before they had the book that they give you, they have the, the priest every week gives you the mind control of the week, and then you get re-upped on the new mind control every week, and they do the ritual, they do the and it's a magic thing where they got the white host and the red wine, you know what I mean, and the white host, it represents the male sperm, and the people have to kneel down, and then he puts it on their tongue. It's really next level gross. And then the wine is starfire, menstrual blood, and everybody has the combination of
in a gold cup.
Cup, right?
Yeah, skin of the gods. Flesh of the gods. All these Babylonian concepts. Now, here's something I'll throw out that I was just reading before. Kubrick's first wife was a ballet dancer, and ballet is an art form that is derived from ceremonial positioning and in the court of France.
Really?
Which
yoga type?
Yeah, basically,
The movement of the body for whatever placement of.
and basically it also shows who's a noble, because you're not in on it if you can't do the moves. So all of that flowery, sort of thing that you see from, musketeer movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. This is what influenced ballet as an art form. Of course, the court of Louis XIV, where it was absolutely personified, he became the Sun King, an interesting term. And that's where you get the concept of left and right in political thinking, that the noble sat on the right of the king and the plebs sat on the left, and so on like that. But again, we come back to this ritualistic element, that court ritual or courtiers, even going back to Elizabeth I, but go all the way back to Rome. It's like Tom Cruise going into the party. It's obvious he's an outsider.
Right.
It's obvious that his character is an outsider.
Is a bumbling idiot.
Yeah. And so
jerk.
Pageantry and all of those ritualistic court things practiced in both the church and also in the in the royal establishments and so on. It was a way of filtering out the pretenders.
Right.
A way of seeing who was really in on the thing, that they were projecting. And that kind of fell apart in the Revolutionary Age, 1840 through to 1917, with the Tsar's family being butchered and so on like that by the Bolsheviks. But the idea,
is that because they needed to hide those type of movements and stuff? Because if they showed that, then they'd get murdered by the Bolsheviks.
I don't know if I don't know that. I think the Bolsheviks were just simply out. Yeah, okay. I think the Bolsheviks were just simply out to wipe out anybody who could possibly oppose them on that any level. And it was a massive shock to the royal families because they're all connected. Yeah. The Duke of Edinburgh died recently. Once was asked, "Why do you hate communism?" Because the bastards killed my family. Right. Because the House of Battenberg was very much a part of the Romanovs and so on like that. War of the Cousins, World War I. They were all interlinked, and you got those famous photos where they got all the kings of Europe, and you're looking at basically everybody. They all look related. It's just because they were. But this idea of an art form developing out of a code of posing and a code of movement that was a way of defining whether somebody was within the right families, the right bloodlines, that kind of stuff. You get taught at a younger age. It becomes a ballet. Yeah. And ballet is full of this pedophile stuff. The Nutcracker.
It's in Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh, man.
Eyes Wide Shut.
She asks to stay up and see the Nutcracker.
That's the one. Yeah.
Right. And she goes over when the Nutcracker, the young girl, goes into a dream state and is brought to a place where the people are like dolls that are alive, just like the mask.
Looks alive, right?
Right. Looks like alive. Huh?
Looks like alive, huh?
Yeah. And it's exactly it. They got a doll face and the robe, and it's a moving, living doll. So it seems like a dream, like they're going over the rainbow. And that's, if you look at Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler and the other like people that have exposed SRA programming, going over the rainbow relates to becoming dissociative and having your soul pop out while your body is being abused. Right. And it's that's the moment of escaping from the trauma.
Right.
And rainbow programming, rainbow is like a red flag to that phenomenon. And so that's what the over the rainbow, the rainbow fashions. So that's like, it's telling other pedophiles, this is where you go. This is the place.
The Nutcracker and Pinocchio are kind of, twin stories. Right. In terms of whether it's boy love or girl love from a pedophile perspective. And these are very early parts
that makes sense.
of very early parts of ballet, and how, because ballet was very much the preserve of the aristocracy and such. And, for a lot of us, it looks poncy, it looks, overbearing, flowing that. But the ballet movements, an aristocracy watching that would have seen coded moves in terms of courtier moves, and it was almost a way
it's a message
and a way of learning and so on like that, and
it's a way of displaying the young girls that they can have and taking the I want that one. It's an advertising,
like an auction.
Right And
display case.
the children, the pedophiles, they get them at auctions,
ballet people,
and
ballet.
they do the Nutcracker. The Nutcracker is the first ballet with children, and it's done at these schools, and the little kids are put on display, and they're they get to do it every year. It's a Christmas thing, and so
ballet women who've prima ballerinas or I forget what they call the next level down, but then below that you've got the corps de ballet, which is usually the young girls coming out of the schools that they do that famous swan dance thing that they do. And so I've read books by women who worked at the Royal Ballet, achieved very high up. I'm not thinking of Darcy Bustle. It was her sort of generation there, but there was another woman, and I can't quite remember her name. She wrote a book called The Everyday Ballerina. She couldn't help it, but she said that that basically they know that when they're out on the stage, that though they love ballet, and there is a group of people who come to see the ballet, the vast majority of the men are there to look at the pretty girls. That's what it's about. And before
that's what
there
puts
were
people in the seats. They got to make money, right?
Yeah. Before there were rock groupies and so on, the story of the Ballet Russe, and its journeys in the 1920s through America, and that is about as debauched as you get. You'd be pretty hard pressed to find many rock bands that can match some of the debauchery that was taking place with some of those ballerinas while they were on tour.
I mean, if you learn about the royal families and stuff and what they did, even the Catherine the Great from Russia, learn about what she did. My goodness.
Absolute power, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
So that sort of maxim. It is so, because many royals claim to be like the Queen of England is also the head of the Church of England. Right? That's the role that she plays. Okay, it wasn't quite the situation with the Russian czars or other royalty or something, because the Pope took that role if they were good Catholics. England is still excommunicated as a nation when it comes to the Catholic Church. I don't know if people know that, but they are the only nation to have ever been actually excommunicated because of Henry VIII's deciding he was going to be head of the church in England and so on along those lines.
Right.
But again, it's like, how can you get so many royal institutions who justify their authority through claims of linkage to biblical history, to biblical ideas and that? Yeah. And when you go and read that, it's like, but this is so different from what you guys are actually doing and have done. Yeah. It's nothing like the way kingship is, spoken of in terms of biblical law and so on. But they've managed to make everybody believe that they rule by divine right.
It's silly because the book, Jesus is saying, like, you have a relationship with me only. Read the book yourself. Like,
that's right. Don't need a priest.
Right. You don't need a hierarchical structure of obedience between you and God. But these guys are like, oh, hey, while Jesus is gone, I'm your guy. I got this gold stuff. I'm gonna wear these robes, guy. And
sure.
And then look at the new Pope. He's a Jesuit.
Same as the old Pope.
Right. He's got pedophilia symbols on his robes.
Yes.
The double the spiral triangle, spirangle, it's called, or whatever. He's got those all over his stuff. He took over after Ratzinger, and Ratzinger was
they had to get Ratzinger out because he was fiddling the books to get everybody, all the kiddie fiddlers, put in places where nobody could still go after them. Well, and that was all coming out.
I think that was his job, and he was put under the bus, and then the other guy, the Jesuit, takes over.
Well, the Jesuits are the SS of the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
they are, and in fact, they could probably teach the SS. In fact, my understanding is many were, squirreled out by Jesuits and Catholic, in the rat lines.
Right. That's true.
The Second World War, and so there's that connection. But he's the first Jesuit guy, and a very dangerous individual if there ever was.
And the Jesuits were infiltrating every order to work for, Yes, and they were, if if you think about SRA again, they were doing the worst torture and learning about it,
Yeah.
learning about how far you could torture somebody before they died. That's
Yeah.
the same stuff that Mengele was doing with all the
Yeah.
twins. It's the
Mengele was a
same
Catholic, I
research.
believe.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Mm.
Yeah. It's and you were saying about how England, was excommunicated, but they are owned, they're managed, their money is managed by the bankers of the Vatican.
Yeah.
So really they took them over again with
Yeah,
finance.
same way that America was finally taken over in 1913 by the same interests.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
After successfully breaking away from old world control.
Yeah, we had
structure.
70 years of freedom. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. Yeah, but I mean, we can do it again. All we got to do is say no. It's
Break the
really
bank.
easy. Yeah, break the bank, exactly.
Yeah.
Like just say no. Work on,
Like-
create another system that works, and everybody can just hop over there and because I mean everybody's bailing out of cash. I mean, dollar is crashing, and they're on purpose crashing Bitcoin because they want to keep the dollar inflated. I mean, keep it working, not really inflated, but you know what I mean. Keep the dollar pumped up with value because everybody's bailing on it. Even, OPEC is bailing on it. Everybody's dealing in rubles, and like China is
Actually,
dealing
that may be as we look back
a design
in 20 years time or something like that, the poignant moment of the crash of the Western banking system may have been when Russia said you can pay us in rubles.
Yeah.
And that is a phenomenal moment. It's one of those apex moments that you'll see in historical studies.
Yeah.
It's in my opinion, it is as significant as the voting in of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, Christmas.
Right. And that's why all the hate for Russia. That's why Hillary wanted to go after him back then.
Totally.
That whole thing. And they've been painting it up. It's all planned. I'm a blue collar guy. Like Dave McGowan. I mean, I hope someday I get to be as good as that hero. But in any case, I'm a regular guy, and I was delivering bundles of newspapers to stores back in 2016. I was driving a van, and on January 1st of 2016, when all the primaries were happening for the new election coming, January 1st, on the cover of every newspaper, Boston Globe, New York Times, all these papers had a burning tower. And if you know about the tarot, and the tower is the 16th Trump card. It's like they're telling us Trump is going to take it down, right? Yeah. They showed everybody, and Trump was going to be the one to tear down the old world. Like, hey guys, we're doing it, get ready. And so the tower, that was their occult symbol to all the others. It shows like, this is what's happening this year. And everybody, it was a joke. Trump, oh yeah, him get elected. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah. And it was like, they do that. They show, because they want all the other Satanists to be on board. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And
this is how they talk to each other. Yeah.
Right.
And so, it gets put out as, messages. They've been doing that at least since the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Since the printing press became, available on a mass production level. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have cognitive, if you don't have the ability to decipher the truth, then literacy can be a form of mind control. Like people aren't even literate anymore. They just absorb through the television, and now their phone that they take with them, it's going to be VR next. And like,
you mentioned, that interview on Red Ice that I did years ago. And such. One of the things there was, the god Thoth, the bringer of writing in the Egyptian mythology and so on, is actually castigated because writing takes away your ability to memorize. I'll just write it down, put a note, put it over here, such. Right now, English is so widespread in the world as a lingua franca, but it's been helped by the medium of song. The Beatles being popular. Yeah. And it's been, so music and singing and chanting used to be the way that a lot of people learned stories. You know, that's why so many of the old mythologies, particularly in the Norse traditions, are really songs. That's how people learned it. That's how
you remember
storytellers remembered it, and so on like that. Right. And the advent of the novel effectively took away that tradition of learning. When my mother was at school as a kid, you know, you sang the ABC. You know, you did all these sorts of techniques. Kids don't have that now, but they are very, very much influenced by what they hear through music still, and who controls them.
Right.
You know, so
Satanism, basically, the evil ones.
Absolutely.
You know, and you look, and they've dumbed down music so far. I don't know if you guys have heard of the millennial whoop.
Nope.
It's this thing. It's like all singers in the millennial generation of popular music, they all would go oh, like a bird call. It wasn't even words. It was just
hold a note.
Yeah. And it goes like up, down, down, up, down, like that, like a bird call. And that everybody sings along. It's already their favorite song because it's all the same. Every song is the same. It's like it's whoa.
Yeah.
And then they're all singing about the most debauchery.
You know, when Kubrick was making films at the beginning, he was working with people who, despite the fact that, you know, the Satanists were getting their hooks in on the whole deal, you were talking about genuinely talented people. Sure. And I remember when I was at university, a Japanese guy had come to Auckland University to the music school there, and I used to pound around on the piano down at the music school and so on. And he would come along. This guy, because the Japanese, you know, they have that culture of perfection in what they sort of tend to do. He would blow a note and try and hold it for a minute perfectly. All right. And that's all he would do. He would practice that ability. That's beautiful. I got talking to him about it, and he was saying that you now have a situation where pop stars, and I'm talking about the late 1980s. He was commenting on this, all right, where pop stars and people coming through the music industry today, they can't hold a note.
Yeah,
they just don't have that ability to do that. The old guys, Elvis Presley could hold a note like you wouldn't believe.
Right.
Barbara Streisand could do it. All these sort of old school guys.
Both of them are SRA. Both of them have been abused as kids. I'm just saying, like, well, they were influenced by the trauma. The trauma enhanced their abilities to focus their, you know, and it's it's next level, like
Elvis, Justin Bieber, talent-wise, you know,
well,
seriously, in terms of what
you're right.
You know
what they've dumbed us down to the point where they don't need talent anymore.
That's right. We can accept what used to be.
Talent can be in the background.
New Zealand, you know, this American or Idol or Britain's Got Talent. All these shows. These are opportunity knock stuff that are pushing the next, you know, sort of generation of stars that they're going to have. And you know, the only guy that I can think of that did well in opportunity knocks was a 12-year-old Jimmy Page, who blew away the audience with his guitar playing as a 12-year-old. You know, back in the early 1960s and such. And then, of course, he went on to, you know, with that sort of talent. But when I listen to, you know, I know that songs change and people's tastes change. But what shouldn't change is what Picasso said about painting. You've got to be able to paint well in order to paint badly. You know, when people criticize him as being a bad painter. And it's true. It's why Picasso's work looks different to imitators who haven't gone through the drafting process that he had. And, you know, I would throw out there that this is the problem with the SRA situation. The talent pool is getting worse and worse.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely.
I mean, Britney Spears, come on, you know, now they got Cardi B. Like, what are they singing about, you know?
And Cardi B, she just goes around bragging about how she used to like be a prostitute that would drug guys and steal from them.
Yeah.
And she's promoting that now.
Right. And she says that she doesn't cook, she doesn't clean.
Yeah.
Really
she gives it up.
I don't want to work. work, right?
Okay.
So
Anyway,
it's all
she
about
sings
that
about-
new lifestyle.
He sings about being basically a whore, you know, and
Right.
that's the epitome of what kids should look up to being and whatever. And it's like, and it's kind of the epitome of what they've been working towards this whole time. Like they started, you know, they started with the Carter family, you know, nice, wholesome, everybody plays together and everybody sings just like your family used to, you know, like before you got the radio. And but you know, and then it progresses to like, you know, alcoholics and you know, and then you got Dolly Parton and like with the fake boobs and the, you know, the hair and the looks and your husband's gonna cheat on you, you just got to take it. It's like, oh, he's a drunk and whatever, roll over. And so like it promotes the degeneration of the families. And then they got the 60s thing with the, you know, the long hairs, and they create this dichotomy and they crash them together. It's all mind control manipulation. And
See, I'm going to go back further. All right. And I'm going to say that a lot of this starts with the advent of Marlene Dietrich, Blue Angel, the German woman. And she starts this androgynous whore concept. Women
Which is highly
wearing
occult.
men's, women wearing men's clothing and so on along that line. And, you know, it gets to the stage where in her films, she even got John Wayne to dress in drag. You know, it's just unbelievable. That,
he was the symbol of men for a long time.
And it's like nowadays they got Bruce Jenner like dressed up in drag, you know, and he's and they got like the most famous photographer to put him on like the cover of the one of the most famous magazines. And if you don't say that he's brave and strong, then you're a bigot and you hate the world.
You're a racist.
Yeah.
And a Nazi.
Silly.
I mean, isn't it crazy now that Wikipedia refers to her winning the men's decathlon?
Right, her,
you know,
men's,
love it.
But now there's men like winning the women's swimming champions. But I mean, you know, they love that the opposites, the mirror, you know, to totally take nature and turn it against itself and be the opposite.
Absolutely.
And it's like a F you to God, you know.
Yeah. Bill Burr put it perfectly. He said, you know, this whole sort of men wrestling with women, it's like you're paying to watch a guy beat up on a woman.
I know.
You know,
it's sick.
You know, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And he makes a few other comments.
That's okay because there's money and like you accept that. But you know, and they go home and they get, you know, all like 60% of police officers beat their wives. Like, you know, it's like it keeps the family destroyed. Like if it's accepted for dad to beat up on mom, you know, it destroys the whole thing.
Yes.
Like it destroys dad with the morality and he's got to live with that. And then it destroys mom. Like she is not safe and like she can't trust, and it destroys the child who has to witness this. Like I know people, some of the toughest, like, you know, like I met in jail, this dude, his, like, he remembers vividly seeing his dad smash his mom's face against the toilet. And he grew up to be the most scary killer guy like anybody's ever met. And he's, you know, he's nice. It's like he's a gentleman, but he's got that like psychopathy like trigger, like, and it destroys everybody's head. Like that kind of trauma just in the home as a seed just like makes this decay. And if you extrapolate that out to everybody, you know, it's like no wonder everybody is destroyed.
You just got to brutalize the sensitivities of somebody at a young enough age, and you end up
circumcise
Charles Manson.
them.
Yeah.
Charles
Manson's upbringing is a perfect example of that.
Right. Yeah, he went to Boys Town.
That's right.
He was in Boys Town.
Yes, he did. Yes, he
was abused.
Yeah. That's right.
And he was in the MK Ultra program in the prisons.
In the prison, and he was sent to school by his stepfather for being such a pussy. And then he was sent to school as a 7-year-old in a girl's dress.
In a girl's dress,
Right. And if you learn about SRA families, they would raise their kids and they would make them wear the opposite gender's clothing. If you read books by Kurt Barker, he wrote many books, and he would talk about how he had a woman's name. He was Kathy, and he had to wear a dress. and they did pornography and abused him and took pictures. And then, you know, in his normal life, he was Kurth. But then, like, when they're abusing, they put the dress on, and then they would have him marry a girl dressed as a man in a satanic wedding, like in another ritual. Like, that is considered satanic ritual. There's like a list of what marrying another against their will is part of it, you know, being put in a, like, there's all kinds of things. But in any case, that is a sign, another sign of this, you know, intergenerational, like multi-generational, you know, cult of Baal that sacrifices children to Moloch. You know, it's the same today, and it's still around.
Throw in the cannibalistic element to it,
right?
Because that's what it was. The Bible is one of our sources for the Moloch, you know, what's called the passing through the fires and so on.
Right.
And a lot of people have criticized the Bible for the invasion of Canaan, the land of Canaan, and putting all the Canaanites to death. But it actually makes perfect sense that, as they say, you could put all the men and such to death and so on in their cattle, but you could take the women, you know, girls and such, like, you know, as your own. And a lot of people say, what the hell's going on with that? And it's very simple.
Right.
The girls were never invited to the cannibal feasts where the first
where they eat the blood. Because you can't eat blood, right?
That's right. The girls were exempt. They weren't exempt. They were barred from that. It was the blokes of the Canaanites that did that. And so subsequently, the trouble with cannibalism is that it produces diseases that can be passed on.
Yeah.
All right.
Look at Hillary Clinton.
Disease. Well, yeah. It's going Kuru. It's, you know,
right. Prions.
Yeah.
And if you look at what's in these you know, these jabs, there's prion.
Well, look what happened with mad cow disease.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. Mad cow is cows eating cows, and that's what you get later down the line. All right. So
if you've
got to get rid of the ones that are affected that way.
I just wanted to throw in a slight debunk. They were injecting all the cows with a injection, and it was the result of the injection. It wasn't actually them feeding. There might have been cannibalism in the cow's feedlot, but it was a result of the medication that was given. I forget if it was a growth hormone or if it was a vaccine, but there was a law where everybody in England, like all the cows, had to be injected with this thing. And all of a sudden this appeared. And I think that they were saying it was the ingestion because they were trying to distract away from
an actual
what they could. They could get sued for the other thing, you know.
Well, that would make sense.
But the prions is a thing that is a real, and mad cow is an example given, but that is a real phenomenon. But the mad cow thing was, I think, a side effect, or
you can see from a biblical perspective that's why these people, to use a modern term, were genocided, because they had 440 years of cannibalism going on in the land of Canaan until the time that the Israelites turned up at that time. This is what is, you can read between the lines in terms of the biblical account. Then when you get to the Roman accounts on what the Carthaginians, who are the people who are pretty much the descendants of these people and so on, and people have tried to, sort of
they had the
Tophets.
They were they found Tophets with bones, and they were like, oh, there's a lot of babies, but
they got a whole baby cemetery, and they've tried to.
It's just a cemetery.
Full of,
It's like in jars.
Yeah,
like the remains are like ceremonially placed in jars. I mean, go ahead.
If you're trying to establish a historical theory, all right, one of the things you need is documented evidence in the academic world. But when it comes to Moloch worship, you've got documented evidence from the Romans, from the Bible accounts. You've got it from the Egyptians. You've got it from the Babylonians and so on. And still they tried to say, no, it wasn't as bad as they're saying. And yet at the same
they're still
time,
doing it and they're covering up.
Hillary Clinton's one of her people say, I'm going to sacrifice a chicken to Moloch, and such. All right, you got the the gate or the arch of Moloch being brought into New York from Syria. The one thing they decide to save out of all of that culture,
that they tell us is saved. I'm sure they got vaults, they got stuff hidden, because I'm sure there was because there was the Taliban is our guys, and they were going around. They would steal out of the museum and then bomb the museum and say, "Oh, it was bombed. All those things are gone, bombed." So, like, I'm sure it's
Joseph
just
P.
a
Farrell,
looting. They were looting.
Yeah, exactly.
They were. Joseph P. Farrell is very big on that kind of
He's great.
the grabbing of the documents, the plates, and these things that from these ancient times. It seems to be so important to these people to this day. But well worth it.
If you think about, like, this Cybele had a black stone that was a meteorite. And then it was disappeared, and then all of a sudden you've got the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia there that has a black stone. And also there's the idea of the Black Madonna, these carved that went up to France, like these ideas of this like celestial thing that was born out of like a mountain, and they still worship. It's just like stolen and taken to the next place and stolen. And oh, this is something different, guys, but it seems like it's all the same. It's weird. Like, Rome
as you know from my own source stuff, and that, to me, it all goes back to interplanetary events within the experience of the human race. And that has been willfully distorted as a means of control, because we do get triggered at a subconscious level by certain things, certain symbols and so on. It's so burned in, the trauma of the original doomsday and such. This is what these people feed on.
Memory.
Yeah, they feed on this stuff. It's there. Guys, one thing I really wanted to ask both of you tonight was something Jordan and I covered last week, which I've not been able to really fully, get not a handle, but get an opinion on. And that is the influence on Kubrick by the Russian filmmakers that, sort of before the Bolshevik Revolution, the Eisensteins, Battleship, I can't pronounce it, where is it?
Yeah. I am not equipped to answer that. I need to look into that.
Covered, Ross? Yeah.
I need to look into that. I will.
Because that was one of the things that with Kubrick that really stood out. He was literally the only Hollywood director in as much as he was working with those studios and so on, who seemed to film in the same way that these Russian guys. And I've always believed that if the Bolshevik Revolution had not happened in Russia, I've always believed that the Russians would have left Hollywood for dead in terms of where we went.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
For
Germany had a lot of like very good artistic directors as well.
Sweden,
Bergman.
They had that, and it just seemed that filmmaking as an art form and a form of narrative and telling a story, rather than as a form of entertainment.
Oh yes,
this is what was being done, and that's what Kubrick seems to have. Because I did read in a Wikipedia thing or something, he had a love of the old Russian filmmakers, and then they don't expand on it. I don't. It's lost. So
I'm gonna look into that. You give me a mission now. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, he is telling that it's like a new, like the movies are a myth, like it's the new myth forming, and everybody used to know the same myths, so we all had the same archetypes to work with.
Exactly.
And it's like the shared dream that we all have, and so we can reference it with each other in different ways. Like in Eyes Wide Shut, he referenced, well, I guess the writer of A Dream Story, I forget the name, but that the writer of Dream Story said Nightingale, the piano guy is Nightingale, and that is reminiscent of the Ovid story of Philomela. And that is like, for people that know mythology, when you hear Nightingale, you think it's a sorrowful lament. It's a sad sex, rape, murder type story. And so like those types of things are used and it's layered in. And Kubrick, he thinks that we're intelligent enough to find that and to understand that when the story is being told. And so he emphasized it again, a couple times. And so by giving us all of these shared archetype, he's like taking on the the duty of giving us a new myth, right? And in that, he's layering in these other things that we can find later, that these other messages that he wants to tell us are like hidden beneath. He knows that we're going to see it again and again.
As an expose, it's not
Right.
just relevant to the time of the film, it actually encompasses past and future.
Yeah.
Because he's really talking about something that is as old as Moloch.
Right.
You know,
Human
in terms of
slavery
stuff.
right?
Yeah.
Domination, like, you know, the nature of evil, what it is to be a human with living in this trauma. Like, yeah. And like and you know, he was an atheist. He was a staunch atheist, and it almost has like, he's illustrating his it almost seems like a nihilistic kind of sorrowful lament for humanity, like that, you know, why are we so violent? Why does power do this? Like, why do we give up our minds to this slavery? You know, it's like he's bringing it all to our vision. He's showing us the mirror, like all good artists does. It shows us the humanity of ourself, and like we can question our own morality, and you know, and him being an atheist, he allows the Christians and the Darwinists to, you know, he melds it together in 2001, like where the ape and the murder is the first murder of the Bible, but they're apes too, you know. It's kind of this melt, so everybody gets the story, and we all have this same
and the star child concept, you know, with the Messiah sort of idea, the advance to, you know, human, you know, 2.0 type sort of idea. That Star Child thing was what really first convinced me that Kubrick was doing something beyond just entertainment.
Yes.
That he was discussing something that wasn't obvious until it was pointed out to you by somebody who'd seen a symbolism, you know, along those lines. Jay Widener is the guy that I credit with sort of giving me the real key to, hey, look at this guy's particular work. You'll actually know more about what he's saying is going on behind the scenes of the world, watching if you have these keys, and you know, just take it from there. It was very interesting.
And he influenced, like, his theories were used in Room 237, and
he's the space program thing, wasn't he?
And the other theorists that were included, Julie Kearns is phenomenal. Holy crap, that's some real deep. Look up her website. Everybody should look up Idolopus Press. It's awesome. She goes very deep. And the gentleman Mark, oh man, it's got 3 names. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it, but the guy who he suggests in that film that Helena is stolen at the end of Eyes Wide Shut.
And that was a moment for me the other night.
Man.
Like, it dinged in my mind. I was like, bing, and then I recognized the SR8, like the monarch babies are stolen from the monarch mothers, and it's a generational thing. And then you look at everything fits, and it's like, oh whoa, you know. And so he's showing us the mind control of, you know, of generational satanic ritual abuse, and that is the most debauched and evil thing, and it's all right there for us to see, but we don't see it because we're all blind, because we're all dumb. And it's like, that is the overarching conspiracy, the biggest conspiracy there is, like, and Kubrick is like, hey everybody, it's all there in New York, and there, you know, there it is, and it's all the powerful people. If I told you who they were, you wouldn't sleep so well at night, you know.
I'm not going to tell you, but if I did tell you.
And as he's telling you, those portraits are visible in the billiard room, and those portraits above the table are the same as the masked individuals above the carpet. And it's like the same. He's showing us in the portrait, so that even if they do cut the film, it's still there.
It's there,
It's
You're not going to cut
in
this
words. It's not said in words. It's said in pictures.
Man.
He's a photographer. He's like putting it on the frame instead of putting it in the words, because they can cut all that out. It's really deep. And he's such a. And if you look at the ending or the beginning of Lolita, the Quilty is shot. He's hiding behind a portrait,
Yes.
and he's shot through the portrait by
That's
another
right.
angry pedophile. You know?
Yeah.
But we don't learn he's a pedophile till later.
These
But
pedophiles, man.
you know, it's and you see like the house is all like you know it's like he doesn't care about his possessions. It's all like destroyed, but it's ornate, and the rich people are just drunken, you know, playing Roman ping pong, like you know. So it's Kubrick is revealing it all right there in the first couple minutes, and it's beautiful photography. It's some of the best. Like,
sorry, the opening shot.
Yeah, the opening shots of Lolita,
for sure.
Like
of Lolita, yes.
The beginning of Lolita was all very ornate and beautiful, but it was destroyed. There was like sandwiches and empty bottles, and you know, it was like, it shows the state of the families that own. Like they have been destroyed and debauched, and they are littered with immorality. It's like you know, it's a visual representation of the state of the person who owns the house. And there he is. He gets up and he's wearing a robe. You know, it's the Roman, the Vatican, like, and they're playing ping pong. And it's like he told us way back then that ping pong is related to pedophilia. And now in Pizzagate times, everybody's like, everybody's like, oh, that's crazy. Oh,
that's stupid.
He was using cheese pizza, everything.
Right.
Man. There, you know, as scenes.
Yeah.
You know, the whole idea of watching that point with the Japanese.
That scene is so big to me. That blackmail box, because it's just it's not to put a specific name to it, but it's essentially he's calling to Jeffrey Epstein to and
perfectly, and right above it is the rainbow.
And then right above it is the rainbow.
You know what I mean? It's like neon sign. You know?
And you can't help but look, because it's such an interesting office, and it's this glass, and it's like, oh wait, there's this office within this. It's so weird. It's like,
why is it that it's a trap? And the locks, double locks on the outside, on the outside of the door. Obviously, it's built to trap you in,
like a zoo, like a little zoo. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And so then you got the cameras that can see everything through the glass, like
exactly.
And
or if you want to bring someone in to show,
you brought right. You trap them in there and say, "Give me money," or until I call
let's work this out, or exactly.
And then if they give enough money, or if they prove that they're part of the club, like, oh, you're cool.
One of the things, Sean, that you pointed out in your analysis and so on, which I didn't sort of link at all, but pinged off a few bells and whistles for me, was the number 10 on the front of the shop. Linking it into British intelligence and government.
Right. Yeah.
You've heard about the house on Charles Street down in Louisiana, in New Orleans, that's a lot of people believe has been an MI6 honey trap.
Interesting.
It's been burned down now. I think it got burned down about 5 years ago or whatever. But the Brits have always worked honey traps. As part of their intelligence.
Like Midnight Climax with MK Ultra, they had and that's what Epstein is. It's a pedophile honey trap,
And the most famous story in British history is what's called the Profumo affair. With Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davis being an underage prostitute, and the guy that was that slept with a government minister and also a Russian spy. So the pillow talk was the key. The minister Profumo had to resign as a result of it. Very few people don't understand that the guy at the center is a guy called Stephen Ward, who is a homosexual with allegations of pedophilia against him, who was sort of running the pimp thing. And he was gotten rid of pretty quickly after those things. But, that British idea of capturing people through blackmail and so on, that is something that the Brits have had since the Elizabethan days, that they, when fighting the Pope and so on. But here's the thing I'm going to link that all into, which is a can of worms, because, the two people are actually still alive today and such. So why did Kubrick, why for Eyes Wide Shut did he cast Hollywood's most famous member of a cult with all kinds of allegations to him, whose wife's father Tom Cruise's father-in-law was seriously engaged in accusations of mass pedophilia in his own right at the time.
All that stuff.
And Nicole Kidman's father.
That's who I'm. Yeah,
that's who he's talking about.
All right, I thought you said Tom Cruise. Yeah. So like the reason is because Vivian Kubrick became
Scientology. That's a bit.
She got stolen away by the mind control. She was supposed to do the music for Eyes Wide Shut. She got during the production. She became under the spell of them.
That happened during the production.
During the production of Eyes Wide Shut.
Not as a result.
They need to make a movie about that.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Production.
And so Nicole Kidman is just there by virtue of being the wife.
I think that like she is there because it's a power couple, and like it's you know, like with Ryan O'Neal, you got to choose one of the big ones, right?
Yeah.
But I think that he saw his daughter was being groomed by this cult of Scientology.
Yeah.
And he learned about the occult, and he learned about the machinations of this, what they do. And Scientology is related to Crowley, is related to all that.
Jack Parsons.
Yes.
All this sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, the Elron was a Thelemite too. Like it's not just because he's friends. Like he was following Crowley, he was doing what Crowley does. Yeah. And so like his creating Scientology was creating a form of religion, is mind control. It's like, you know, if I can be king of these people, then I'm king, you know, like an ego thing. And ego, like ultimately is like, you know, it's like I can be God, like it's another satanic ideal, you know. But I think that they were chosen because Kubrick was trying to tell us the message, and he knew that Scientology is related to these cults, that it is a cult, and it works with sex magic, and it does, you know, and the Freemasonry structure of Freemasonry is very similar to the way that they structure the hierarchical.
With that?
Why did Cruise do it?
Yeah,
because he's an idiot, and he wants to be he loves. Like I've heard interviews of him, and it's like, oh, Kubrick is oh, he's the best, and
he just if you watch interviews about him, man, he's kissing his ass. Totally.
Yeah. And this is the longest production of any film ever made.
Yeah.
And his people, Cruises, wanted to make more Mission Impossibles and like crank out more of those stupid movies, but he was stuck filming this Eyes Wide Shut, and he was there for the longest time. And I think that by the end, Cruise might have had a hand in making this end, because I think that the powers that I'm just speculating here. I know this is going to be put on the internet. You
Buddy, go for it. Let's hear it.
yeah. But I think that Cruise and Cruise's people, the Scientologists, might have been involved in the untimely death of Stanley.
Interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, that because I mean, people are pretty much convinced that something unnatural happened to, you know, end his life.
And there is a such thing as a heart attack gun.
I was just gonna say that is totally possible. And to add, I've gathered that it seems like at some point during production, his decline in health took a significant turn. Where it was just so it's like, okay,
I think
is he being poisoned? Is he like, I get that he was being stressed, but it seems like at some point
smoking again.
It took a significant turn and then it quickly led to his death date.
To suddenly he died suddenly 666 days before January 1, 2001.
Oh shit! Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, they love their numbers. Symbols will be their downfall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, Scientology is, you know, it's a cult that can mess with the big boys.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, as part of the whole sort of thing, it's a scary outfit.
They won against the IRS.
Yeah.
I mean, whoa.
Yeah. And you know, so I've always wondered about that, and it was just the fact that whether, you know, he died before he could be really grilled in a courtroom, but Nicole Kidman's father being so much smeared
Right.
with whether it's the truth or not the truth. Just the fact that I don't know how a movie career survived.
Yeah,
That sort of thing. So
some people can do some wild. I mean,
I think it's because she's
Polanski's still doing all right. He's done some
true.
I'll bet you that she was an SRA child, and because her dad was doing it for MK Ultra, like I think that she is a victim of that, and she ultimately is controlled. And now that she's beyond mother age, now she's crone. I think that
has she ever had children?
I think so. I'm not sure. He's got.
I know
you can take a look
children.
with the. You can take a look with that search engine. Right.
Oh, apparently she's
currently with that Kiwi bloke, isn't she? The country singer.
Keith Urban, yeah.
Yeah.
So under children, it says Isabella Jane Cruz, Connor Cruz, Sunday Rose Kidman Urban, Faith Margaret Kidman Urban. So I'll take a peek and see which ones are actually hers. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, what they maybe she was making babies for the cult, just like she did in Eyes Wide Shut. Maybe those babies are also SRA programmed.
Well, the Cruise ones were adopted.
Oh, really?
That I know, because there was always that talk about
because he's
Tom
queer.
Cruise being infertile or whatever like that.
It won't get up when a woman's around.
Yeah, puff gun. He, with what's the name, Katie Holmes.
Oh yeah, she had to have that baby.
She's definitely genetically his and hers, it would seem.
She had to have that baby in silence. She wasn't allowed to make any sound, and he ate the placenta.
He ate the placenta. Yeah,
right.
Keith Urban did?
No.
Cruise with Katie Holmes.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's interesting. It's interesting that Katie Holmes was in like a makeup commercial later, and that had lots of splashing red, like lots of blood, and it was, I forget, but it seemed like it's almost like the advertisers were using the archetype of like the blood and the placenta and like that whole thing, like, hey, look, it's weird. I mean, I think that they use these things like pieces on a chessboard to like frame in our mind, because everybody's going to remember, oh yeah, he ate the placenta, and oh yeah, it's and now they've got this actress that was in the Transformers movie or whatever, I forget, some pretty girl. Yeah.
Oh my god,
yeah. She's talking about how, yes, we drink blood, but only in ritual settings.
Like she's.
Oh, really? Thanks for telling us, lady.
Yeah.
They reveal odd things at weird moments.
Yeah. Stuff comes out every now and then. I remember when it started to be known about the Hellfire Club, the Hollywood Hellfire Club, stuff started coming out in the 70s to do with what was going on. I think it was the late 50s, 60s, the Hollywood Hellfire Club events during that time. As I say, I've often come to believe that the stories of debauchery and excess that you get out of the rock and roll era, I'm talking sort of 65 through to probably 1990, those wild days. And so they're like amateurs to some of the stuff that you later on find out was going on, in these sort of hellfire clubs and islands that they have down in the Caribbean, and, special New York clubs that they've got going, and even back in Europe. And I believe we are going to eventually find that the whole focus shifted to the Balkans region. A lot of movie stars are making their way to places like Serbia, Croatia, and so on, particularly Serbia, because I think it's 16 is the age of consent there.
Oh, just like in the Philippines, it was like 12 for a long time.
Dude.
There was a bunch of pedophiles down there for a while.
Well,
lots of Masonic temples too.
I lived in Hong Kong for 15 years, and I went on a cricket tour with a group of guys, and it became very apparent. I was very naive in those days. We went down to a place called Angeles City, and pedophilia was in your face. It was everywhere as such, and it was quite a shock, because I wasn't quite sure what was going on. It wasn't sort of like throwing them on the table and having it there. It was just sort of like leaving rooms with what looked like, kids and so on like that. And the city was where the American Air Force Base was before it got closed down. And so, it had been developed up around that. But
just like the Presidio and, in America, like they have the babies of the military people that are taken for this. They grow up, like Dave McCallan said, like all the 60s rockers were all kids of military, and
especially if they're from intelligence.
Military
intelligence.
And the people in the military intelligence that are doing MK Ultra, of course, are going to use their kids. It gets them promoted, and they can do research while they're at home. Why wouldn't you use your kid? Because they won't have any morality, whatever.
Well, the biggest shock to me at that time was that without a doubt, it was Australia that was represented as the abusers in such a huge way. There's a lot of Aussies running around there. And of course, many years later, one of the worst pedophiles that they busted was an Australian bloke. I can't remember his name exactly, but, he was recently sort of taken out for his behavior, arrested in the Philippines, and he's been dealt with. I think he may have even died now. I can't tell, but when you talk about the Philippines, my own personal experience was, it was even worse than when I went through Bangkok, and how much it was in your face in certain areas around the Philippines.
Because of the sex tourism. It's
sex tourism and poverty and so on like that. Yeah.
It's like the Weimar thing. Like, you could buy a whole family for cheap and, make a mother do her daughter while you step on the child.
It was bad.
Yeah.
And I should have realized.
And it's going to be that again. They're trying to make it that again.
They are.
And they want to use the law to be able to have a child consent.
Yeah.
They want to get the parent away, and they want to have the,
to be able to sell. Look how Libya's collapsed. Now they've got slave markets. It's
and the organ trading. If they can't use them for sex or for snuff films, they just sell their organs. It's a people.
Well, the same club, I found out 2 years before I got to Hong Kong, had gone to Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka.
There's another one.
Where Arthur C. Clarke went.
Yeah, and
that's where they have the
penny starts to drop,
baby.
They have the ping pong places where the little kids go to sell their bodies to the tourists who come.
Yeah,
and they bring money home to their poor families. Do you guys know
cricket, the sport?
It's like baseball.
Oh, for sure.
It's like baseball, but the places that you want to tour, if you're a person who's going for cricket, if you're in Hong Kong and you want to go off with a cricket club and tour, you don't go to these places. You go to Australia, you go to India, Pakistan. These are the cricketing superpowers. And so on,
man. Right.
And
the former British Empire.
Even if you want to, the West Indies, Jamaica, or whatever, or England itself. All right. These are the places where the cricketing culture is there for the sake of the sport, despite other things. You don't go to Ceylon or to Angeles City,
right?
In the Philippines. It's just those days I was a bit naive.
It's weird. Are you a cricket man, Troy?
Oh yeah, that was the one sport that I actually could play well out of the things, and it's one of those games that you've got to grow up with, and such. But cricket, rugby, and boxing are my things.
Rugby, boxing. Okay. Since we were talking about Hong Kong and your experiences, you've dabbled in it over a few episodes, but can you give us a quick rundown of your experience in Asia and in the film world there in Hong Kong and such? It sounds very interesting. You have you talk about it a little bit, and I wouldn't mind getting a better picture.
Well, I arrived there in 1993 when I was 27 years old. And, I had sort of ambitions there. If things didn't work out in Hong Kong, I was on my way to Europe and, sort of see what happened there. Because I had a British passport, so I could travel the whole of Europe at that place and so on. But Hong Kong, is an easy place to arrive in Asia because everything's written in English. Most people speak English, a little bit like the Philippines and so on.
Because of the Opium Wars.
Yeah, it was Hong Kong actually didn't exist as a town before the British made it. They were actually chucked out of China. And said, I'm going to take this island off the coast. And the Chinese said, just, stay out of Canton and that. And And they turned it into an opium place, and it's a pirate
And then
city second to none.
HSBC,
Worst outfits. I still bank
Right,
with them
right.
because of
Oh no.
yeah, I still bank with them, and
Well.
because that was the only way I could get an account. They were worldwide in the UK when I came.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it was
at
my
the time,
history with
right? I see.
HSBC.
Wow.
But I knew of
It's
the
crazy that
opium.
they're still a power and they're still huge in banking.
Yeah,
It's all opium money and slavery and
it is. And so the Hongs, I was taken aside by one guy, given the power structure of Hong Kong early on.
Ooh.
And he said, you think the governor of England runs this place? He's way down the list. All right. The guys who run this place are first and foremost the Royal Hong Kong Jockey Club. It's now called the Hong Kong Jockey Club, because they control the gambling. In Hong Kong, you've hardly got any taxation because the government takes money from the gambling. And the Chinese are absolutely, to them, that's sport. Gambling. If there's no gambling, it's not a sport.
That's a more moral system, because really that's a voluntary system. You don't have to gamble if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Really,
the tax system in Hong Kong was fantastic. It's one of the reasons that I sort of.
That's why the prosperity.
But they said that this guy said then above them you've got the Hongs, and the Hongs means companies and so on. All right.
Okay.
And above the companies are the tycoons, because tycoon is a Chinese concept. Like typhoon is a big wind, tycoon is a big man, and such like that. And so at the top of all the tycoons and all the managing directors all belong to the Hong Kong Jockey Club, and that's where Hong Kong is ruled from. And you can do well in Hong Kong as a businessman. It's the freest business system. You can just print up a card, you're in business for whatever you want to do. But if you get into that higher level, where you are rubbing shoulders with the top Hongs and the big managing directors and things like that, then it's a different story, and it can actually become a very frightening story, because there's so much funny money being washed through Hong Kong. It was one of the great financial sinks, from the Second World War right up to the Chinese takeover. And so that's what Hong Kong was really all about. It was funny money to be earned, but you could only go so high without having to then join these influential type organizations, marry right, all that kind of stuff, and so on. But because the money was there, it didn't really bother me at that time to go there, because I didn't really plan on becoming that rich. The reason I went there was to see if I could break into the Hong Kong film industry. This was the land of Bruce Lee.
Is there a lot more freedom there than in America to make what you want?
Anywhere. Than anywhere. It's a cowboy town. And, I've been involved in this where you still ostensibly you need to get permits to film. All right. Okay. But there was a famous instance.
Is it like a bribery thing where you just bribe the right people?
You don't even have to do that. You just shoot it, hire a couple of guilos. All right. Like me, guilo meaning a foreigner.
Guilos. Yep.
Put them in a seat that says director. Shoot what you're going to do. And when the cops come along because you've blown up a car in front of somebody's hotel or whatever, and this actually happened in front of the Mandarin Hotel.
Wow.
So
beautiful. People
were totally unaware of sitting down for breakfast, and suddenly 3 cars blew up outside the thing. The film crew packed up and left the guys to take the rap. They were paid well. Or
and they couldn't be
license.
They couldn't.
In the meantime, they're setting up in
foreigners.
another location.
I see.
Yeah, and
there's always a workaround. There's always a way to be free.
And it was great fun. It was truly, it was rip, shit, and bust the way that they filmed, and I that would have been a major production. I worked on some Western films that were shot there. There was a couple of Steven Seagal productions, to drop names. Claude Van Damme was out making one thing, and I worked on one film that would turn out to be abysmal. What do you call it? Ultraviolet. It was kind of like a vampire flick with Mila Jovovich when she was big on those zombie type things and such.
Yeah,
and then the big names there. I did a couple of Jackie Chan films as an extra, and did some camera behind the scenes stuff. Great guy.
That's fun. Yeah, I bet he is. He seems great. Yeah,
and it's
cool.
It's because
you can see he radiates that happy energy.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. No, he was totally personable to everybody and such.
Cool.
Great to go along. It was an interesting, that particular one. It's called The Medallion was the film. You've seen it? You'll see me. I'm one of the SWAT crew.
Okay, cool.
All right.
As
they go into.
I'm gonna write that down for later. Sweet.
Yeah, it's, you'll pick me out. A lot younger, a lot thinner.
That's funny.
And I remember we were talking with him because we were filming some shots where they had to film Jackie at one of these kiosks or what. He was eating octopus, and we get the alarm, and he sort of leaps over the barrier of the street into the car. We drive away. Nice. We had to take a number of takes doing that, and he was telling us that this is the first time he had been able to film in the region of Mongkok in the streets for nearly 20 years because the triads run everything at street level. All right. Right. And if you're not on side with the triads, and they find out, and they will know within seconds when the cameras get pulled out because they've got people on the streets everywhere. Yeah. They will just send all their guys down to ruin your shot. They'll just stand around in front of the whole thing until you pay up some money. All right. And somehow,
that's a non-violent way of doing it, at least. It
is. And that's how they extort the filmmakers. So they stop doing films in the streets of Hong Kong, that sort of thing. And for some reason, we were able to, some deal had obviously been made and we were allowed to film in there. But what I learned from that, from other people, is that it's all triad money that runs the Hong Kong film industry. And the reason why Hong Kong produces some of the most dire films production-wise, the total opposite of the Kubrick production we've been discussing, is that every single film virtually comes in exactly on budget.
Oh yeah,
nice. They never go.
Kubrick's good with budget too. He really is good with money.
Yeah, Hong Kong.
It's interesting.
It's your life if you don't produce. If you don't finish. The
film exactly.
Right.
Exactly. In the red is in the red.
It's funny that because look at the like what Hollywood is built on Jewish mob money. Mm-hmm. Meyer Lansky. It's all. It was built on that, and then that was prostitution. Yeah. And it was, it still is, in my opinion, Hollywood. Maybe. And so it's the same. And the mob, like the Italian mob, works for the Roman Catholic Church. Basically, they're like an arm of the Catholics.
Yeah. And you want dirty work, wet work.
Right? Yeah,
wet work.
And you think about like the Jewish mob is more of the same, and it's the same. It's how their power octopus, it's really interesting. And movies, like you were saying earlier, it's so important on how they program us, and they give us the information that we work our decisions on, and it all comes through the box. We all watch like reality through this Plato's cave of the television, like in chains, mental chains.
Well, I don't know how Kubrick would have shot films in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong became infamous for the skin flicks of the 1970s, the Emmanuel series, and sort of white people go to Asia and get overwhelmed by the sexual freedom, which is a total myth in terms of that. Some of the most conservative people in the world when it comes to that kind of thing. But so I don't know how Kubrick would have existed when Kubrick, it was a fast day when Kubrick was doing 3 or 4 setups. Yeah, I've worked on films where they were averaging 40 setups a day, and you've got these little Chinese guys, that they hardly got any muscle. They're handling $1 million cameras and running up and down scaffolding. It's just no such thing as union rates.
It's like Sherpas. It's like,
it's, but the way they film is just bang, bang, bang,
Right. Well, Kubrick was the exact opposite. Like I saw an interview with the guy who played Ziegler. I forget his name.
Sidney Pollack.
Sidney Pollack. Yes. Thank you. So Sidney Pollack was explaining how Kubrick was telling him, because Sidney Pollack is a director as well.
Yes.
And, they were talking shop, and he mentioned to Sidney, he said that, isn't it funny how the least expensive part of movie production is the film itself, and they spend millions of dollars on all these sets and
setting it
makeup,
up and actors,
and then they do 5 takes and all right, we're done, tear it all down again, and this Kubrick is a photographer, and like working with photography, you do a whole roll to get one frame, and you want to have the wide array of things to choose from, because there's all little accidents that happen, you know, and that's what he was working with. That's how he made such master work, you know, masterpieces.
There's a story in Hong Kong about one particular film. I've seen the film. I can't remember its title. It's a Chinese film based on Chinese mythology and so on. It got stuck and went over budget, and so they were only 1/3 of the film in terms of what they had to deliver. And at that point, they only had the budget left to edit. You know what they did?
They just
watched the film.
Released it.
Well, they released it, but they shot a few scenes of the main actress just looking into the distance, and she goes through flashbacks of the first third for the last 2/3 of the film. It's her flashbacks into the first third. And that's how they got
genius.
That's it's almost worth watching, knowing in terms of getting around, a filmmaking sort of idea. But that's what I mean by, you deliver in the Hong Kong sort of film business and so on. It was the best thing I ever did in my life, was getting that kind of experience. I thoroughly enjoyed some of my trips into China, working on some of the productions over there. And when I started to develop my own video production business in the early 2000s, I left in about 2006, and I finally got the money together to put, because digital video had actually arrived at a stage you could film on certain digital cameras, and they could actually be put at theatrical release level and so on. So I've got the lighting and so on. And what was great about Hong Kong was that I could just go and, if I wanted to film a scene and it required a backdrop of, let's say, Hong Kong shot from across Kowloon Harbor or whatever, I'd just go down with the talent, set up the shop, get the lighting right, and I would film it, and I'd have it in the bag. And there was no sort of hassle, or it was that free in terms of how to work.
That's great.
From that point of view, I loved the city. But probably the worst thing that ever happened to me was trying to tell an English guy who came over for what they call the Hong Kong Sevens, a big sporting event in rugby that they have in Hong Kong. It's famous for stuff. And and he was thinking about coming to Hong Kong. And I said, what's great about this town? It's safe, especially for Europeans. You really have to go looking for trouble, in this town to get into, to have any problem. And it wasn't like the sort of the English New Zealand sort, what you're looking at, that kind of aggravation you get when you just go for a night out on town. Somebody might take exception to the T-shirt you're wearing or something like that. We've got a lot of that in New Zealand. In England, it's the hooliganism is just out of control. I don't know how much it is in Canada or America. I'm sure they have that. But
people are pacified pretty much. They're mind controlled and dulled. They're all in front of their TV. They don't, they're pretty bad.
Well, in Hong Kong, you really have to be looking for trouble to get the locals worked up or whatever. And usually the trouble is between the Guaylo population. So I told this guy that, you should think about living out here if you do. And it's a safe city. Next day I came back, he was in intensive care, having been macheted, down his neck, everything. Only because of a mistaken identity. A bouncer at one of the tents had turned away a Chinese woman who was connected. And he went back, got her lot, and they came back, and she pointed at the guy I was speaking to.
The wrong guy. And so they attacked him, and they call it chopping, they need to work with him.
Yeah, they do.
And such like that. And I felt so bad.
That's awful.
After telling that bloke, that it's such a safe town, and he probably experienced the worst thing that could ever happen to you.
And right after, he's probably like, Troy, I talked to Troy, and he said I would be fine.
If he could even remember my name, I debated going to see him in hospital, but I thought, I just wondered if that would trigger sort of like what the hell, something along those lines. But that happened there, and I left Hong Kong about 3 years after that. But that always stuck with me, when you can get just too casual, too safe in your sort of way, and you forget that Hong Kong actually does have a reputation.
Shit happens,
and So that was my sort of film time there. I spent quite a bit of time traveling China itself, which was like dropping back into the Middle Ages in certain parts. I went to Western China where the Uyghurs are and so on. And not a lot of love lost between Uyghurs and the Chinese. They have like old Wild West wanted posters everywhere on Uyghurs that they want to capture and all that sort of stuff. And this was about 2000 that I was.
They sell their
there.
organs.
They
capture
do.
them.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and
it's terrible.
Yeah.
I worked on one film set where they brought Uyghurs down because when they couldn't get, Europeans on the set, and they wanted to get Europeans a lot to play like, journalists or things like that, just to a lot of their films to sell into the American market. They would get Uyghurs down to pretend to be, European because they didn't have a Chinese look about them. And the way they treated the Uyghurs was shocking. They basically, here's your water, was a barrel out in the sun, with a ladle. It's like something out of the Wild West and so on.
Yeah.
And they would bring in the food and it would just be sort of dumped in these polystyrene things in the middle of this, subtropical heat. And something happened when we were filming a scene, sort of a journalism scene. I was playing the part of a journalist asking some martial arts fighter what he was going to do in the tournament. It was one of these tournament movies. And there was a massive ruckus just kicked off in the background, and all the film crew ran towards it. As dust flying everywhere. Basically what had happened as it split, the Uyghurs were on one side. They'd picked up lighting poles and anything for a weapon. And the Chinese were on the other side. It was like two medieval, armies shaping up for a showdown. And somehow they managed to talk the whole thing down as such. But after that, I found out that we were getting 1,000 Hong Kong dollars a day, about $250 US a day at the time. Those guys were getting 20 US dollars a day,
Wow.
and so totally exploited by the Chinese. There's no doubt about it. They have my empathy, the Uyghurs. But they live in a beautiful part of the world up in Western China.
Unbelievable.
It's tragic. What happens to the world is dominated by psychopaths.
I have no idea what Hong Kong is like now what is it now?
The new normal, you mean?
18 years since I left or something, 2006. So with the Chinese, what I've seen there and so on, all I know is it won't be the same as what the media are telling us.
Probably.
Because I remember when the Brits gave over Hong Kong, there's a lot of this whole thing about the media and how they program us into thinking and so on. A lot of people thought the Chinese were going to, bust in on Hong Kong and so on like that. That wasn't the case. It was one of the most peaceful handovers that we ever had. But the rest of the world thought that they were coming in with tanks and so on like that. A little bit later, they showed a lot of protests going on in Hong Kong. And I couldn't believe it because my parents are saying, you got these protests, you got these pro-democracy protests going on in Hong Kong.
Yeah, they were waving American flags.
Yeah, but I'm talking about 1998.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the new ones.
Yeah,
the ones
this
like,
is
okay, yeah.
And what I knew, it had nothing to do with democracy. What it was that the Chinese were protesting how the housing market had crashed under Chinese governorship when it had always gone up under British governorship. In terms of that you bought a flat in Hong Kong, land was at a premium, you made money, and they weren't making money. So they were protesting that, and the media ran with that as an anti-Chinese pro-democracy thing. Wow. I was there on the floor, on the streets at the time. Those people were not pro-democracy. They were pissed off that they'd lost their equity in their real estate purchases, Right. And you just learn from that kind of thing that the media, it'll tell you what they want you to hear. Right.
It is propaganda all the way.
Yeah.
It always has been. Yeah. And it's like they infiltrate your mind with it. They used to fly planes with pamphlets that they would drop over enemy lines, but now they got these, the internet goes right to your house and right in your brain, like.
Yeah.
So,
well, one thing sort of the last thing on the whole Hong Kong thing is that, which has sort of reference to what's happening in the world today. I am totally convinced that the fentanyl problem, the drug problem that is coming out, that is wrecking America and North America and European countries and so on, that is your example of multi-generational planning by the Chinese.
Yes.
We think in terms of quarters, what's going to happen next quarter in the stock market. That's about the extent of what we're trained to think of in terms of long-term planning. The Chinese, I think, decided back in the Opium Wars, the 1840s, the 1860s and such, they were going to get back, do the same thing, but it was going to not be their grandchildren, but their grandchildren's grandchildren that were going to do it. I would put money on that this is their revenge for what happened in the Opium Wars, the
Right.
opium scourge that Britain and American companies launched on China in those days.
It's interesting too. I completely agree with you. I very much agree. And it's interesting that fentanyl was invented by American scientists and was patented or whatever. It was approved by FDA in the 1960s. And that's around about the same time that Kissinger went to China and opened up the trade with China. Yeah. It seems as though that was the door that opened up and then they learned about fentanyl, and then they're like, okay, and then they start mass producing. Now they got carfentanil and these like super drugs that they just have a warehouse, like a place where I work. It's like the grime and grease and everything everywhere. They don't care. A drug dealer in America can order on the dark web a pound of any molecule he wants. China will provide that. Yeah. And American like drug DEA type whatever, they said to China, hey, please stop doing that. China says no.
Yeah. You've probably heard of a guy who's a perennial president. He's dead now, a guy called Lyndon LaRouche.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, you know his stuff. I remember coming across his outfit where he declared the Queen of England was the biggest drug dealer on the planet.
Yeah, they made an SNL skit.
Yeah.
And I remember.
I looked, I thought, come on, this is just taking it a little bit too far in terms of that.
But it's real.
What I didn't realize was that what they were talking about was Queen Victoria.
Right.
All right. It was her go ahead that launched the opium.
Right.
Sort of the epidemic of opium that hit China, destroyed China.
Right.
It really changed China from one of the oldest consistent civilizations into a country that could hardly put together a wheel for itself in the face of Western aggression. They couldn't protect themselves and so on. The opium epidemic was fundamental to that. And that's where I with Lyndon LaRouche and his lot, I suddenly realized what they were actually referring to is that the Saxe-Coburgs gave royal decree for people to take opium out of Afghanistan and sell it into China. And that's been the playbook of the elites in terms of drug dealing. They've always had that until recently, that kind of power to target anybody. And I honestly believe, I said just before to you that I think the Chinese, you're seeing an example of that legendary ability to go, I'll get you back. No, I won't. It'll be my grandchildren's grandchildren,
Right.
and that's their mind of thinking. They have a different approach to
the
time.
long game.
Right.
Very much so. The land of the long talk, the long walk, and so on. The
bloodline families do the same. They set it up for their future, and that's why they interbreed in their own families, because they but what you're saying, I just lost it. I'm sorry, please continue. I just fumbled my thoughts.
Lyndon LaRouche.
Yeah. Right. So yes, Lyndon LaRouche, he was speaking about the current times too, like, because they had they called George H.W. Bush Poppy Bush for a reason.
Yeah.
And they it has always been opium, and then it turned to heroin. Like it's always, and it's been consistently been going. And the CIA is like an extension of the British thing. Like it was created by the British, and the OSS was created by them. The OSS turned to CIA, and the Skull and Bones is the CIA. Skull and Bones is opium families. That's who created Skull and Bones. So like that is, it's it's still happening now. And the reason we don't need Afghanistan anymore is because the market has been flooded with this other synthetic stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like if you talk to people that deal with it, 1 pound of fentanyl costs the same as a pound of heroin, but you can only cut heroin 7 times before it doesn't work anymore. Fentanyl, you can cut it like 20, 30 times, who knows? And so they make that much more money, and so it only makes sense.
And
with a free market, it only makes sense. And I've met people, like, I'm from the North Shore of Massachusetts, where like heroin comes in on boats, but now they're getting fentanyl through the mail. And like they people on the street, they want fentanyl, they request it, and they get 2 grams of this stuff, who knows what it is, but there's only a little bit of fentanyl in there. You know what I mean?
And they probably
like,
cut it.
their feet are like expanding like footballs with little toes sticking out, like because of all the toxins in the stuff. Their needles get clogged, because it's all junk, and they're just putting it in their veins. It's not just it's not just the fentanyl, it's the cut that people throw into it. It's just all junk, and then they get 2 grams of that junk every day. And they got to get high more than once. Heroin, you only need it once a day to be normal, right? With fentanyl, you need it at least twice, 2 or 3 times, like, because the up is so up, but then it crashes real quick, and like, so to maintain, it's totally different, and the junkies are, because the up is up higher, then they're choosing that because their minds are broken, and they there's other issues of why they're addicts. But when somebody dies, they're like, ooh, that's the good stuff, because it's cut less. It makes them die because there's more fentanyl in it than the cut, so they go and run to that, like, oh, somebody died, great. So like some dealers of street, like thugs, will make some that has a lot in it so that somebody dies, and then everybody else, they all come running.
That was getting bad. I mean, it is still bad, but
though, it, like, the way it destroys, it's so bad. It's way worse than crack, or even meth. Like that, meth is like a Mexican thing. Like it's like it's made that with the cartels, and the cartels are working with the U.S. government. Look at a project, with the Fast and Furious, where Obama was giving guns to Mexican cartel members. It's like, and of course they're trading drugs too, like but we just don't get to see that. Like, but that's the real market of where real money is, and HSBC is the bloated, all that money being funneled into churn it, launder it into like,
well, it can't operate without a money system. And I said this to you, Jordan, I think in our last talk or whatever. How does supposedly a $700 billion illegal industry operate if everybody's just doing deals with briefcases or duffel bags? The banks have to be
Blackmail.
Complicit. Well, they have to be complicit,
right?
But
they won't be complicit for cannabis. They have cannabis people in states like California have to deal in cash because the banks won't work with them. But meanwhile, they're like doing opium trades, like, like fentanyl.
It's based on that. Did you guys ever come across a book called The Great Heroin Coup? It's by a Dutch investigative journalist from the early 70s. And basically, The Great Heroin Coup is very hard to get hold of, but what he writes in there, it basically discusses the famous French connection and how the Corsican gangs were replaced by CIA drug running outfits. And, this is, with the Golden Triangle, smuggling back of heroin with GIs who killed in the Vietnam War, all this sort of stuff sort of linked to it. However, the most interesting factor of it is that what I learned from that was that the scourges, heroin, cocaine, were all developed by German companies that became, how would you say,
big pharma.
They're big pharma, but the Nazis got hold of them and control of them during the 30s and into the 40s.
Wasn't it they were controlling the Nazis, like IG Farben and stuff, like these, like Bayer, what Bayer came from.
Yeah, I think it became to me, the key is Martin Bormann, a professional Nazi, not an ideological Nazi. He was a manager who understood how to put these things together. So you'd go to the companies and say, you'll give us this and we'll give you this kind of control over the industry and so on. If you don't, we'll shoot you. And
that usually works. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was invested in. You had Joseph Farrell's concept of the international Nazi, power, this sort of behind the scenes power group that, Operation Paperclip became ensconced in the Anglo-American banking system and so on. But the heroin trade sort of points this out, that it has this German connection. And we know that George H.W. Bush was a Bones man, and that the Bones society is derived from a German society, not a British society. It's actually from a German collegial society that they come from. And it would seem that if there is one man who controlled America right up to the end of the Obama administration, it was George H.W. Bush, on behalf of those behind, because he ran the CIA. And I don't care what anybody says, Reagan got the message 3 months into his presidency when he got a bullet in the chest. And that, you don't really run
Hinckley
the show.
is friends with Bush's family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's that whole connection. Yeah.
H.W. Bush was having dinner with some relative of
exactly.
At the time of the assassination.
Right.
The attempt, right?
So he was also probably the one in charge of assassinating Kennedy, because they had many teams working. There was like 22 shooters or some crazy.
Yeah. Well, that pushes it back to 63. You see, so I'm dating it from 71 when he was made CIA chief.
Well, that's according to what we know, but he was working with CIA for that. Like, he's Bonesman, like those guys. That is CIA, really. Yeah. And so, his family worked for the Harriman family, and that's And
the fact his dad was run out of Washington for pro-Nazi sympathies. The old, supposedly there was a coup.
Right. But the Nazis, they created the Nazis to fight the communists. It's like the Nazis wouldn't have been Nazis if they didn't have Ford engines.
True.
Like, it was all created by like the capital of the West. Sides. Yeah, right.
I think Hitler, committed the ultimate sin. He decided to go out on his own to a certain degree. Right. And it's my opinion that this is the work that I've got from Dave, I've forgotten his name, Dave Emery, guy who's been sort of what he calls the Underground Reich, and Joseph Farrell sort of riffs on the whole thing with the Nazi International. There is that Nazi element that is almost like a third wheel to the Anglo-American banking establishment, and they're only partners of convenience. There's a guy called Professor Sutton.
Anthony Sutton.
Anthony C.
Anthony
Sutton.
Sutton.
Yeah.
He
was the
those
first
books.
guy.
I've got a bunch of his books. Yeah.
Have you got the original
Fleshing Out Skull and Bones?
Yeah. Because that came out when I was still at university.
That's great.
And he was the first guy to say that. He wasn't going to immediately say that there's a conspiracy, so to speak. But then he started realizing that there was these people who seemed to belong, and he found out there was a list of names, and he matched the two up, and he said there was that kind of influence. But I loved what he said in that book at the end. He said at the end of the day, they fight amongst themselves for power, and you get all that kind of squabble that comes out every now and then, but they are the ones who are in the goldfish bowl in actual reality.
Right. Like crabs in a bucket.
Compared to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And that is such a, I've always taken comfort from that viewpoint that he expressed. I've always, thought that that's about the best sort of form of hope. It's very easy to get sucked into. These guys have control. They run everything. We're doomed. But I think he's right. I think he's right.
I mean, they're a bunch of like children, that are a lot of like the SRA ones at least are abused as kids, so their minds are fractured and stay in that childlike state. So and if you see like a child having a tantrum, wanting to be violent, it's some of the most primal, and if they can capture that, and you use it for the psychopath that they're creating in the future. So it freezes their consciousness in this like primal rage type of thing and so these people are created through trauma. I mean, you got like if you recognize that, then you can have compassion for their soul. Like the soul is like trapped in this flesh that has been abused so heavily that they're still total slaves to an evil, agenda, hierarchical structure of obedience,
Yeah, sure. And
to an evil
it's an impossible
force.
thing for them to get out of. The only guy I think ever got out of it would have been the what do they call him? The unknown Rockefeller. I've forgotten his name. There were four brothers who were right in the thick of it, but there was a fifth brother who just went his own way. And he's just not included. I've forgotten. It's not Lawrence Rockefeller. It's was it Winthrop Rockefeller? I can't remember. But it's one of the they had five brothers,
Right.
and four of them were incredibly involved in this whole manipulation of the Western world and geopolitics that is associated with what people call conspiracy theories. One of them somehow managed to get out of it.
That gives us hope because there's always free will. Even the most darkest of families, the most traumatized people, they can choose to not. They can choose to live a moral life. They don't have to abuse others. They don't have to, once everybody says no to these evil orders, then the world will be healed.
Michael Rockefeller.
It was Michael Rockefeller, yeah. So John D. III, Lawrence, David, and Nelson, about a bunch you can hardly find.
Whoa, did you hear about this, like how he died?
Which one?
Like Michael, and how like he was, there's just the first thing I pulled up here about.
Oh, he wasn't the one who was cannibalized, was he?
Oh yeah, likely eaten by cannibals. Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of another. There's another Rockefeller.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he's the son of one of the big four brothers. He disappeared off, what do you call it, New Guinea. And they believe that he was,
okay,
eaten.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's one of the,
so it's a generation
but
back.
those families eat people.
He was the next generation after the four brothers. The four Rockefeller brothers were the third Rockefeller generation. It was John D. Rockefeller, the first guy, John D. Rockefeller Jr., and then John D. Rockefeller the third, and his three brothers plus one who seemed to sort of drop out.
Oh, so four. Okay, I thought you said five. My mistake. Okay.
No, five brothers in total.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay,
I'm certain of that. Yeah, I could be wrong. I might be thinking about Lawrence Rockefeller, who was the fourth, but I don't think so. Lawrence Rockefeller was too heavily involved in world wildlife conservation, that whole idea of the plan to, put everybody in these little bubble cities and but that one guy, the tribe that's been blamed claims they don't know of the Rockefeller. But then, they probably have every incentive not to, fess up to the killing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. Winthrop, David.
Winthrop. That's the one.
Winthrop. Okay.
Winthrop's the one. Yeah. Okay. The quiet Rockefeller. Yeah. Now, of the four, David may have been, the most industrious in terms of evil, how we would sort of consider, the influence on the world scene. Nelson's the guy who's responsible for your famous 25th Amendment to get rid of the president through cognitive, the means and so on, because he tried to be president, and he effectively, the closest he got to it was when he became vice president to Gerald Ford.
Yes.
After Nixon resigned. But he just couldn't quite get somebody to follow through on the assassination of Ford. They tried 5 times. he just kept surviving. And I think, sometimes you do wonder if divine intervention takes place in the world to stop Nelson Rockefeller becoming president through the assassination of Gerald Ford. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's their foundations, though, that so much of the damage has been done to the United States and so on, especially in the areas of education and justice.
Okay. They set these roots and they take their hold.
Incredibly rich in their days.
Yeah. Oh well, right. Yeah.
$450 million in $1870. You know, I mean, I've heard, sorry, that's not quite true. It's $471 billion by today's money that John D. Rockefeller, the first guy, had at his fingertips. It wasn't even like in stocks and stuff like that. These guys, you know, Scrooge McDuck diving in the, you know, in his money pools and things, you know.
It's good. I like this conversation.
Yeah, we were just saying too that this is a good talk.
Thank you.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah. It's great to talk with like-minded people. You know, just in terms of what's interesting in the world itself and that. So
people lose sight of what's interesting, it seems.
Yeah, they all want to follow the orders.
Kardashians, baby. That's what's interesting.
Controller. Yeah.
Troy, I did want to add, I wrote this down because it would have gotten lost in the shuffle, but it just brings in like 2 or maybe even 3 different things that we've been talking about. You were talking about Charles Street in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
So Charles Street is a filming location in Live and Let Die, Bond movie.
All right. Yes, that's interesting.
So it's just kind of funny that we were talking about Bond
and also
and MI6, and
New Orleans is a center for occult. You know, I need to add something. Rockefellers had a party in 72 where Salvador Dali helped to inspire some of the
Rothschilds.
Oh, Rothschilds. Yes, you're right. The Rothschilds. Sorry, those were infamous. And the photographs from that, there was a blonde woman who was in a fancy dress and she was wearing a deer's head.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, she was Lady Rothschild herself.
If you look up close, there's big diamonds coming out of her eye, the eyes of the deer.
Yeah.
So that's the trauma of the deer. That is like the pain is like and she is the prey. And you know, and she's just displayed having drinks for this huge head. Do you see this picture? Yeah, right there on the top right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
the
see
symbolism
those are
from
diamonds.
that party. You know, there's the deer head that she took from she had it modified, didn't she, from an actual, you know, trophy thing. That is probably one of, I mean, that had to have influenced Kubrick in how he modeled his
the masks. Yes, completely.
Notice the bird
for
cage
sure
as well. Notice the
like
bird
these
cage.
ones.
Yeah.
Like there's totally Eyes Wide Shutty.
Can you? There's one. You can see Lady Rothschild not under order. If you go down the right hand line, she's actually without the head, but still with the antlers, doing a pose there. So she's playing, you know, the part of that.
No, sorry, which one?
Right
here. I'm sorry.
That's the one. Yeah. You know, she's the same party, but she's probably decided that she wanted to show her face a bit and so on. But she retains the antlers and so on. You know, she's playing High Priest of Ishtar. There is no doubt about that. The prostitute of the temple. And the one that got me from that party, though, is Audrey Hepburn, the Hollywood actress. She came with a birdcage.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And, you know, that's some serious, that should be a warning to any would-be actress who wants to get into Hollywood. Is how you're going to end up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. It's about as satanic as it gets, isn't it? Just looking at it. I can't remember who else was there. I mean, Dali, I don't have too much time for Dali as an individual. And I think he was mostly an opportunist. I'm much more interested in Man Ray and Duchamp and these kinds of guys from that surrealist movement in terms of what they were showing us to the world.
Oh, look at that.
Crazy stuff.
Look at that one. That one's crazy.
Yeah.
Is it the same party?
Yeah, they love it. And Marina Abramovich is just simply following in this tradition.
Yeah. What's that all about? There's lips. Seems to be a symbol there on the napkin.
Yeah,
too.
the lover's lips.
Yeah.
There's a big surrealist issue. Turns up in the Black Dahlia. That's why she was slashed.
Gotcha.
You know, and such. But yeah, these are the big boys of this kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like, look at, like,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
It's
Now,
just,
if you take that dismembered doll, that's straight out of surrealism. Just think if I got, because I got to get the name of the guy right.
okay. Oh my God, that's
It's
so
not to
weird.
hand, but it was very popular in the 1940s and 50s to pose broken dolls.
Well, the Beatles wanted to do it on
That's
one of their covers.
SRA. That's all SRA.
Who is the guy? He's virtually a pornographic artist. Gee, I wish I could find that book. It's
The guy who painted Obama.
no, the guy who used to do all the artwork photographing dismembered dolls.
Oh shoot, I don't know. I forget. Oh dang. I think I know who you're talking about though.
Well, Man Ray did the dismembered women.
Yes, yeah,
And
as well.
And yeah, the Beatles did have that album cover that they discontinued that picture and they did a new picture. I forget.
Yeah.
But they had like babies and body parts. They were in like
And they were covered in
butcher's
blood. It was a
costumes.
butcher, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Look at this is interesting too.
Hans Bellomer.
Hans Bellomer, okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you guys can see the kind of picture.
Oh yeah.
So it starts there.
Oh,
And, you know, I've got the guy did a book on it that was supposed to be pro the guy, but all he does is expose just how obscene
Nice.
a lot of this guy's work was.
and it's like
And,
fractured children, and they have fractured
Totally.
their multiple
know,
personality.
Here you go, that can be seen.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
All right. It's this kind of all sort of stuff. And that's what you're seeing in those Rothschild pictures.
Yeah.
It's a celebration of the broken doll sort of theme.
Of the abuse of
Yeah,
children.
that's why I say
and
people
women.
want to understand from a secular point of view. You don't have to be a Christian to be anti-Satan or anything like that. You can go and look at secular guys like the Surrealists, and you can see stuff that you just know is evil, even if there is no God. You know, it's just wrong.
Yeah, I always say, like, because you know I've done a lot of shows about SRA and like the satanic cults, they don't really they might not even believe in Satan or all of the things the rituals are purported to do, because really what they want to do is scare the kid. So they have this like ornate, scary scenario where they murder their dog and they murder their best friend and they drink the blood and the kid thinks, oh, whoa, they're doing this for Satan, and it's that much more scary. So it that much more fractures the child's mind.
Yeah.
So really, it's just a practice of like taking control of another's mind through the like scientific application of trauma. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Satan
And you
doesn't
can do
even
that
really
on a
have to
personal
be
level
there.
and on the national level. You know.
Yeah, right.
It's you know it's all
I
the
mean,
way
think
through.
about circumcision, what they do to kids. Like that is happening on a national level. Like in America, it's still like. Anyway, I get, that's tough. Like what they
female
it's
circumcision is
that too. Yeah. But I mean, it's routine in
blows
America for males, and like they call it routine infants. I mean, how can trauma be routine? Like it's so evil. But it changes the brain of the baby forever. And like it does for females, and it puts them in a more easily dissociative state where they more easily comply because of that trauma might be inflicted again. It's like it's mind control by traumatizing the body directly. And if they get them younger, then it affects the brain more deeply in a more core level of the self of the individual.
I think as well, as we get older as adults, we often actually forget what it was like to, going back to our earliest memories that we can remember as kids. We forget what it was like to be traumatized by something that was threatening. As an adult, you build up defense mechanisms and so on. And we sometimes project that onto kids. They can take it, they can do whatever. But, before the age of 7, and such, it's truly terrifying stuff can change a person's personality, even overtly, let alone within an attempted program at it.
Exactly.
It's one of the great arguments for, sort of restrictions on what can be seen in movies by children and so on. I know I was traumatized by a scene. I went to a drive-in as a kid, smuggled in the back seat, under the blanket or whatever. And I peeked up during one thing, and it was this horrific scene of some guy falling down a dark pit and screaming and something like that. And
that's
and
a primal fear that
it gave me such a problem for years. And finally, I decided, well, what was that film they were advertising? I went looking for it. You know what it was? It was Hamlet.
Huh.
It was,
Oh,
it was
wow.
Laurence Olivier's
yeah.
film Hamlet,
Wow.
where there's a scene where Rosencrantz and they get executed by throwing down the pit and so on like that. So it came out of Hamlet that I'd studied in school many times, but I never connected to that traumatic thing. That was one of the most traumatic things I saw as a child that I can remember.
Wow.
You know? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and the medium of film, like they put you in a darkened space with, and they control the sound and the light.
Yeah.
Everything about the experience is under control of the magicians. You know, it is that they're display. That's why it's so like a dream, because it's like being in your mind. It's a sensory deprivation chamber for a lot of people all at once. You know.
Yeah. Altered states.
Yeah. It's another crazy movie.
Yeah. Cronenberg.
Yeah. So it's really interesting how we see the child and the child abuse and the ancient occult orders are on display in the media.
Yeah.
And if we notice the same, if we can study the symbols, we can see that stuff. Like that's what happened to me with watching Eyes Wide Shut again, and I was watching it with the sound off, and I was listening to music, and I saw like in the frames, I noticed things, and I'm like, oh, and I see the symbols of the things that I'm studying and learning, and I'm like, oh wow, that's what it is like. And you know, I learned more about SRA and about, like, you know, the MK Ultra, like the beta sex kitten mind control programming of trauma-based mind control, like that. It's exactly what Eyes Wide Shut is. And I'm like, look at the first time we see Helena, she's got butterfly wings, you know, she's in a ballet costume, and she, you know, and it's just like, it's so totally visible to people who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, as they say in the occult, you know.
George MacDonald Fraser, have you ever heard of him? He wrote a series of books called the Flashman Papers and so on during the 70s and the 80s and so on. But he did something quite unique. He decided to write a book called The History of the World According to Hollywood. And it was a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. And, you know, he starts off with Raquel Welch and, you know, 1 million years BC, you know, sort of fighting with dinosaurs and things like that. Okay. And he shows Hollywood sort of the progression, you know, of history down, you know, and I think he ends up with Charles Bronson killing everybody in New York and Death Wish.
Death Wish, baby. Yeah.
You know, for those films.
The ultimate ending of a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Everybody dies.
It was actually a very interesting idea. I think that it wouldn't necessarily be that tongue-in-cheek, because you have the work of Kubrick and a lot of other people, but you could do an occult history of the world through what Hollywood has revealed, you know, with dual purpose. You know, let's give this as entertainment, but for those who have eyes to see, they know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You know, a history.
That's really interesting. That'd be
history
great.
of the world, the history of the occult through Hollywood. You know,
that's funny. And you could even like include things like minions of like Despicable Me in the cartoons. They're like, they're Masons, you know, they got the G with the compass and thing, and they serve the master, and they speak all languages at once, like the Babylon.
I was just gonna say the animated Disney stuff is pumped with that shit.
Oh, very magic.
All sorts of shit.
I saw a quote that said that Kubrick said that Disney is the only true artist in Hollywood. Okay. I don't know what he was getting at, but I don't know if it was real reverence or not. But I don't even know if it's a true quote. But
it's
interesting. Yeah. But I mean, he was the only non-Jew in Hollywood, I think,
at that time. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's all like, it's all, you know, rings within rings of control.
But it must be, as far as a history of the occult.
That's a great idea. I think somebody should do that.
Through Hollywood, you know. Because George MacDonald Fraser's book was very, very entertaining.
Mhm.
We learn about the French Revolution, through the Musketeer films and these sorts of things that came through, and that how history of America was almost defined by the Western, in terms of that mythology and that. But the occult has been a big part of Hollywood history, and if in fact they do reveal through the media stuff to us,
I think
there's
like
a lot of stuff that could be pinned.
right, like what I said earlier about the newspapers, that's a way that they can get a message out every day, a visual message to everybody. What they do reveal is what they want us to see.
Yeah.
And do we trust it?
In terms of warnings to us, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's so many people saying, hey, this happened. And if you have a look at this TV show back in 1978 or something like that, like they were predicting it. I mean, The Simpsons, the Simpsons seem to
oh my gosh,
pumping out stuff that, was pre-telling us stuff all over the shop.
Right.
Yeah. Family Guy is another one.
And the Simpsons are Masons, the people that do that. They made fun of themselves with a Freemasonry like episode.
Stonehenge.
But I mean that's that way they can say, oh, it's a joke.
Exactly. Fred Flintstone and those cartoon shows.
The Water Buffalo. Those guys.
That's right. The Grand Poobah.
Oh man.
Jeez.
Interesting.
So maybe something to think about though, in terms of what films really were part of the agenda.
They came to a head in 99. There was
a lot of them.
99.
1999.
There was Eyes Wide Shut and The Ninth Gate. And 99 was 33 years after 66, your birth year, by the way, you said that earlier. 66 was when year one for Satanism, the Church of Satan, starts their calendar at year one.
I remember that,
And Rosemary's Baby was set in 66. It was like New Year's Eve, and he was born in 66, and he was like year one, at the party. So, and that was like the beginning of all of those serial killers, that whole phenomenon started then. And then the
they needed to get the cat out of the bag, because Manson, is without a doubt the centerpiece to Dave McGowan's concept of organized serial killing.
Right.
That the idea that the serial killer, as is portrayed, the lone individual, that's a patsy for what's actually going on behind the scenes. There's a lot changed after 66.
If you look at The Ninth Gate, Polanski's wife is the whore of Babylon, whatever, the blonde angel woman that was played by his current wife at the time. And she's sitting reading a book, How to Win Over and Influence People, I think is the title. And that book, Manson said he used that book. He read that book.
Carnegie's book. Famous one.
She's reading that, and that's Polanski is got that, like she's like an agent of the devil, and she's reading this book, and his wife supposedly, the story goes like his wife was given to this, sacrifice basically.
That was ritual if there ever was.
Yes,
in relation to that,
and the baby. What happened to the baby? Was it, it was almost to term, and it would have been viable. And these satanic cults, they do that. It traumatizes the baby, and that's the beginning of the SRA for that baby. Birth trauma is a big part of SRA programming. They start even in utero.
Was there no trace of the baby?
It died with Sharon.
Was it still in her?
I know, because I know they. Okay.
They butchered the baby through the pregnant. That was what was so horrifying of it. But they wrote all that stuff with the blood, on that sort of idea.
Right, make it look
Jordan
witchy.
and I were last week. Jordan and I were sort of discussing something that I had sort of picked up on, that Polanski had been involved in Blackmail.
Yes, he would film it.
you know, and that this might have been an attempt to actually get some of that material out of the hands of the blackmailers. You know, they fight amongst themselves. There's no doubt
they threw him
about
under
it
the
and
bus.
such.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah.
and because, you know, I say going back to McGowan's work, absolutely is amazing stuff. The way
Yes.
he was able to show that there's a history of these kids dying amongst these, you know, people that definitely have, you know, satanic ritual elements to them, for anybody who wants to actually admit that such a thing might happen, you know.
If I mean, once you understand that key of like, once you have those eyes to see, you see it everywhere. It's all over. And you know, Kubrick knew it. He was friends with Arthur C. Clarke. He admired Arthur C. Clarke's work, you know, thought he was a great artist, but he was also good friends with Steven Spielberg. You know, that dude is horrific what he does to people. I mean,
that kid, that poltergeist,
the young
kid.
girl, I forget her name. I'm sorry, but she died of sepsis from having, you know, her lower intestine was ruptured from some sort of abuse happened.
Heather O'Rourke.
Heather
O'Rourke.
Thank
That's
you.
right. Great tragedy.
I mean, it's intense tragedy, and she was found by Spielberg. He just found her. And then if you see the way that
ridiculous story,
there's like recent footage of the girl from E.T. that grew up to like be a total crazy off the wall, you know, doing all the drugs and doing all, you know, it was like her birthday and she had some TV show or whatever, and they had Steven Spielberg there to wish her happy birthday, and you could see she turned altar. She turned like a baby child, like, hi daddy, I love you, like, and he was like, oh, you're always gonna be my little girl, you know. It was right there in front of everybody. I saw the clip, I couldn't believe it. And you know, that all the other people that know about Spielberg and that, they're like, oh, look at that, you know. And it's all they're exposing it, and like Epstein is a controlled release, you know, like they're not telling us who's a
controlled burn for sure.
Like that way we can all have our torches and run after that thing, and then, you know, they can have the Johnny Depp trial and like we all get confused. What are we mad at?
Oh my god,
you know,
that's circus.
So like it's all, you know, who slapped who at the Oscars, like whatever. It's, you know,
and
what kind of war can we get in?
Christ.
You know, what kind of war like can we distract them with? And like, and again, like another beating up on Russia, like you mentioned earlier. It's all connected. It's really interesting how like all these things, and if you can tell their motives and why they act that way, like, you know, which characters in power are like connected to this cabal of evil, this death cult, you know.
I've got one question. You mentioned Ninth Gate. It's a film I've never seen.
Oh wow.
It's
a Roman Polanski film with Johnny Depp. And it's the apotheosis of a satanic individual, of someone who has no morals, was chosen by this
Depp's character, you mean?
Depp's character, yes. Is this unscrupulous vulture. Like in the first scene, somebody points at him and says, you're a vulture, you know, and you'll do any, like, and so that's his character, you know. He will steal from an invalid, and he's chosen by this, like he's picked to go seek out this book that was made by somebody in 1666 who was burned at the stake. And the person who was burned at the stake, got a book from Lucifer. And then he took that information and created his own book and made 3 of them. And this powerful guy who owns newspapers, rich guy, hires him to go look at, because he has one of those books, and he hires this guy to go look at the other books and figure out why the black magic ritual isn't working, you know.
Right.
And it's supposedly to summon the Prince of Darkness, you know. And so,
do you find it revealing though, as
oh, very much so.
a
I
tour
did
de force of occultism?
yes, I
Yeah.
did a very detailed breakdown of it with New
William
York
Ramsey.
Patriot. Oh, William Ramsey. Yes, I did. William Ramsey too. Yes, we talked about Ninth Gate, and it was very deep. It's like it's an apotheosis of the evil one. Like so basically someone with no morals who's a vulture can be admitted into the Ninth Gate, where beyond that is white light, and it's like it being admitted into the gates of heaven whilst without dying, just walking in as a person. And like that's the end. What Johnny Depp's character actually, the book has pages in it which are pictures like tarot cards, and there's like it's like a riddle basically, and you had to the guy figured out with his own mind what the puzzle is, and the guy who was paying him couldn't get the ritual to work, but the guy who figured it out and had this angelic helper who was the wife of Roman Polanski, who was like this blonde woman who, like at the end, and he's like walking through these pages of like the tarot is the path of the fool, right? And where at the end it becomes a magician, like it becomes like, you know, or like,
and it's not,
yes, like, it was like for 99, you know, set in that time. And so he walks that path, and he does all of these tarot card, like the tarot pictures are what happens in reality for him. And then at the end he has sex with the woman in front of this burning Cathar castle, and it's like she's the beast, or he's the beast, and she's the whore of Babylon, like riding the beast, you know. And
it's right out of Crowley, isn't it? And
yes,
all this sort of stuff.
And then he gets admitted without having to be a moral person like Jesus, you know. So it's like the Satanists wished to skirt the laws, and
gotcha. Which is right up Polanski's street in terms of, you know, he just doesn't want to cop to what he's responsible for.
That too. He'll never come home to face the music. And also Rosemary's Baby was 66, and 99 is 33 years. And it looked like Johnny Depp was in his 30s when they filmed it, and it could have plausibly been a 33-year-old individual, just like Jesus was 33 when he ascended, you know. But it's the satanic Jesus, so it's as if it's the kind of the idea like this evil thing was born in 66, and then in 99 it gets admitted, like Jesus after 33 years gets admitted. It's interesting. It's like a mirrored opposite of the Bible thing. It's very interesting. You should see the film.
I'll give it a look now. As far as it goes, I you know, almost out of the principle, I've avoided Roman Polanski movies.
I don't blame you, but really all Hollywood movies.
I know. I've come to Sean. I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, I can just watch Kubrick movies and like
he's the only
not
one
watch
that
anything else, or I could just swallow it on that account and just say, fuck it, I'll just watch some movies. Like,
I mean, it's good to know the enemy.
Right? Of course,
absolutely. Like I have like saved on a hard drive a copy of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, I think is the name of the TV show.
TV show,
Episode 9. It opens with Arthur C. Clarke playing ping pong in Sri Lanka with an 18-year-old boy in Daisy Dukes. And he's saying, this is my partner. I come to the ping pong place to like meet people like him. And they're talking about rainbow fish that fall from the sky. What kind of symbolism is that?
Holy dude.
You
it
know?
was about as dodgy as it came, Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah. Well, he ran to Sri Lanka to bugger children with the So I mean, and he was putting it all out there, putting it on his TV show. Hey, look, I mean, the guy was probably 18, but still it's his partner, and it's in like short shorts, and he's playing ping pong. And then later in the thing, at like 17 minutes exactly, he says, oh, there might be something behind this. And behind him, there's a person on a checkered walkway, and he's standing with his arms as a square and his head on his hand, like the Masonic symbol of the square. He's on the square, and he says, there might be something very interesting behind this. And if you look behind him, literally, that's the path, the Masonic. Yes, right. It's like, oh, if you're into, playing ping pong with kids, that, come down here. It's like, it's Masons love it. Like, it's sick. And it's like all there. It's like advertising.
See, here in Britain, they had an avalanche of revelations of what was going on at the BBC in the era of a guy called Jimmy Savile.
Right.
Yeah.
And such, right? And you look at that
devout
stuff.
Catholic, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you look at that stuff and what was going on, what people are saying now, and still nobody's held accountable.
Oh, yeah.
No, exactly.
Nobody has been held. Everybody looked and went, oh, this is terrible. Isn't this awful? And yet they'll still go and pay their stupid, BBC television license and so on like that. Nobody is held accountable.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
He's knighted.
Yeah.
They just had this jubilee for the queen or whatever. It's like, there's so like cognitive dissonance. Their brains are broken. Like, oh, we love monarchy.
I don't think he was even stripped of his knighthood posthumously.
Yeah.
And such. And it's like they waited for him to die. They knew it was all going to come out, but they waited for him to die to really let the horrible stuff, the criminal stuff,
And Johnny Rotten is still the bad guy for saying it on TV.
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Unbelievable.
It is.
Cures for the establishment.
Yeah. And it only makes sense. I say this all the time, that in order to make psychopaths agree with each other enough to have a structured hierarchy, you can't just like a true, like you got exactly. The only way to keep them in line is with blackmail.
Mutual assured destruction through blackmail.
Yes.
It's always been.
And the most debaucherous you can get is killing and eating babies.
Because, being caught, in a homosexual tryst just doesn't do the deal anymore. No, it's not,
exactly.
It isn't going to do,
man.
And so you got to go to the next level. At some point, it's even going to, it is
cannibalism,
cannibalism, interspecial sex.
Ugh,
that's
happening.
The next norm. Guys marrying their cats.
Yeah, well, Hugh Hefner, who was, in his words, Kinsey's pamphleteer.
Yeah.
That guy, one of his like girlfriends or whatever, like if you hear the stories from the girlfriend's perspective, what was going on with that dude's psychology?
Yeah.
Holy crap. She walks in, he's banging her dog.
Right.
She's like horrified. What are you doing? He's like, oh, dogs need love too. What? What? Yeah. And that dude is like, oh, he's the most eligible bachelor. Look, he's got all the women, and he's
the guy who set the scene of the 60s for what it was to behave towards women.
Right.
That's
to abuse
his
them
legacy
and victimize them, right?
And
if you look at
Bunny and all that sort of stuff.
And if you look at Judith Reisman, she did a lot of exposure of the pedophilia in the Playboy, Hustler, and Penthouse in the cartoons, and even goes so far as to having kids in weird situations and women dressed up like kids, and articles talking about like sex with kids. And
look at the one in The Shining.
I was just gonna say that.
Sorry.
Go ahead, speak about it. Go ahead.
Well, the copy that Jack Torrance is reading in The Shining, just so casually.
Playgirl magazine.
Playgirl.
What does it say on the cover?
Oh, I forget. I'll pull it up for us.
It says, "Why do parents have sex with their kids?"
Yes, that's right.
And what is The Shining all about? Yes.
Yeah.
And that's like, and in Room 237, they explain and they showed the cover of the magazine. oh, it's obviously that. And why is he reading that while he's having an interview for a job? There, right there. You see in his hand,
Just prepping for
Right.
his interview.
why parents
Right.
sleep with their children. And that's
Right.
what is happening to Danny. And Danny is a split personality. Tony inside him is one of his alters that is more
Yeah.
psychic. It has a more psychic ability because of the SRA abuse.
Yeah.
And it happens by accident with pedophiles. The kids become dissociative, and that happens. So it just
Oh my God.
with SRA and MK Ultra and stuff, they just made it more, it's a more scientific application of this. So like this is a phenomenon that happens. It's gone back to Babylon, feeding your children. They would have these, they would
Yeah.
have sex rituals, and the children that are born are fed to the sacrifice. It's just like
Right.
abortion today.
Yeah,
And
sure.
Margaret Sanger is doing the same thing. Like
Yeah.
it's
There's
the
no doubt
fires
the
of Moloch.
abortion industry is Moloch worship in the modern age.
Yeah.
There's just absolutely no doubt about it. And if they can get the bills forward where abortion becomes infanticide, with a child, with the woman being able to choose to kill her baby,
They're already
up to
trying to
2
do
months,
that.
18 months, you know.
They'll just keep pushing the envelope. Yeah.
It'll
Can
just,
you
it'll just,
imagine?
it'll be pure Moloch worship.
And if you think about it, the government is the de facto parent of all the people. So once it's cool for parents to kill their kids, it'll be cool for the government to kill the people outright, you know?
Of course.
They'll loophole it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's already
Yeah.
democide is already the biggest killer of people in like the last
A lot
200
of
or
people
300
don't
years.
understand that when Babylon is often, it's equated with the rise of King Hammurabi. And King Hammurabi wrote a series of laws that a lot of people say the biblical's Ten Commandments are based on. Right. There's one difference, and that difference is in the Hammurabi laws, thou shalt not murder is not part of the law.
Right.
And such.
It's a big one.
Right. And thou shalt not murder, there's a distinction there between murder and kill.
Sure. Yeah.
Like murder has intent to violate the other. And
the
kill
actual Hebrew
can be
says you shall not take innocent blood.
Right.
All right.
Right.
You shall not take innocent blood.
And what is all those dark rituals? What is all the blood drinking? I mean, it's the exact
more innocent the better.
Affront. Yes, it's like it's a middle finger to God.
Yeah. Again, I didn't know that about the Playgirl magazine.
There you go.
I've been waiting for the great expose into how involved Playboy as a company was with CIA, with the whole sort of and such. I always felt Apocalypse Now that
the redo had
scene
that
with
longer portion.
And you got the scene with the girls doing the dance and the cowboy and all that sort of stuff, and the soldiers riot and such. But to me, it was almost as if he was admitting that the one media agency that you see in that film is Playboy, because it's obviously Playboy or Penthouse or whatever.
Right.
No, they say Playboy multiple times. I just watched Redux the other day.
And it is Playboy.
Funny. Yeah.
There's
it
a bunny on the helicopter.
Were those girls actual bunnies?
Yes.
I believe so.
He was saying like, this is your centerfold.
Yeah, can it sign it? Yeah, because one of it was his favorite centerfold, his favorite bunny.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Playboy models are SRA sex kittens.
Absolutely. I've always felt that that category of what people call the pornography industry, the soft porn, has actually been more detrimental to the way values have developed in the modern world than hardcore pornography. Hardcore pornography is kind of taken over, but it's usually through the softcore pornography that guys get sort of hooked into that sort of thinking and such. And I've always felt that they've had a more detrimental long-term effect than the bluest stag reels that you.
Like I mean, the gross stuff is gross to people. You know what I mean? Like you gotta get them. You gotta start gentle and then bring them down the
get them on their feet.
Tunnel. Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. And these USO shows they use these programmed girls for for spies and they're bringing them to these places where normal people can't go. like it's war zones and stuff.
Yeah.
And these women have missions where
Yep.
they sleep with important people and they give important messages that they don't even know what they're saying because it's in an altar that can't remember.
That's right. Yeah.
You know.
And the only thing missing, you know, the shots that I'm seeing here from that Apocalypse Now, the only thing missing there is somebody looking like Bob Hope.
Well,
Yep.
You know who does look like Bob Hope is one of the masks in Eyes Wide Shut.
Yep.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
Bob Hope mask.
Yeah,
Right,
the
right.
Bob Hope mask. Yeah.
So
The big-
I mean, it's
the ski
it's,
rat
and
nose. Yeah.
if you have you ever people should read Thanks for the Memories by Bryce Taylor, and that is a victim's account of being bought by Bob Hope and Henry Kissinger.
Right.
Together, they both bought her, and Kissinger used her for her mind files, and Bob Hope used her for her sex kitten. And they, when she wore diamonds, she was doing her sex thing, and when she wore pearls, she was doing the mind files. And it was different altars for different things. She was a Cadillac. She remembers one of her while she was on display being auctioned. She was dressed up with a bunch of feathers like they do in Vegas. And she was like, "Why am I up here?" And the guy said, "You're my Cadillac. You're the best version of what our science, what we can do." Like, and they kept giving her upgrades. They would bring her to Disneyland and bring her to like NASA places and put her in like to spin her around in the thing. Right. And they would, you know, they would put light on her eyes and like show her like it was very scientific trauma of the brain, and for specific portions of the brain to do specific jobs. And she was like one of the highest level models. Right. I think everybody should read that book. And it's just, I mean, even if it's not,
cool. I mean, it's radio pretty real to me. You know, centered around it and such. And again, the fact that it's got this link into Hollywood, you know, which was an industry that captured my attention as a kid. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I didn't want to be an actor. I wanted to be a guy deciding what the images were, how the camera worked, and so on. An uncle of mine, Ron Smith, worked for Panavision through the 1970s and 1980s and such. His boss was murdered in a homosexual sort of love tryst. It was have you ever seen The King and I, the original Yul Brynner?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have a
remember
long
the
time
young
ago.
son sort of going et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's an Asian kid, Filipino. He's the kid who grew up to murder my uncle's boss in, you know, and it was pretty famous. There was
the DuPont thing?
Not the DuPont, no.
Okay, that was another homosexual thing.
Yeah, if you find, this you know, this sort of happened as, you know, something about they were trying to get some money and things got out of control and
right.
they were murdered. But
because of the politics of the bloodlines. Probably, right?
Possibly. You know, we would never really know. All I know is that
I guess we can.
My Uncle Ron and my Aunt Sheila were put under surveillance by, you know, the police as such, you know, because they couldn't figure out how it took a good year to figure out how the killing had actually taken place and so on. But, you know, he worked in that industry with a lot of people and such. I always remember him telling me on the phone that as far as he was concerned, the best guy he ever worked with was Clint Eastwood, because Clint Eastwood was a film man. He wanted to know how cameras worked, how things worked, that kind of thing. And it shows in the fact that I believe he makes better movies than he ever acted in.
Oh, I agree.
You know, his directorial work has been superb.
So good.
But he said, you know, aside from that, very few of these people who you see big in Hollywood and so on, they don't have an appreciation of the movie as an art form.
No,
they just want to be famous and
just a check.
Yeah.
Is this the kid, Troy?
Yes, I think it is.
Oh my god, because I'm a huge MASH fan, and look, he's Hojin for MASH.
Oh, okay, right.
Too.
Yeah.
So that's
what's his name? Patrick.
Patrick
Adversarial. Do a search on his name, just see if he went to prison for murder.
Oh yeah, I guess that could have been the easiest thing to do.
I think it's him.
American theater film.
And then you'll get, if it is him, you'll get.
Oh no, maybe not.
Maybe not. There's nothing there.
Well, you can't. I mean, you can't trust Google. You should probably try Quant or.
Yeah. No. Just does it have a Wikipedia thing for him?
Oh, probably.
You know, just on his actual name. Let's see if there's something in there.
Oh, geez.
Pretty short.
Yeah,
I
it
think
doesn't.
there'd
It
be
has
more.
nothing
It's
but his
not him.
filmography.
It's not him. It's another. It's
Okay.
one of the other kids, probably the
Okay.
younger kids in the film. But he's definitely of an Asian sort of background.
Do you think this
Uh,
kid was programmed and it was triggered to kill?
Yeah, it was a very messy affair from what I can know from it. And that I tell you what, and I'll quickly do one here. If you do one on Panavision and cameras and the boss that was part of that company, Panaflex as well.
Oh, it's
Yeah, Panaflex is all part of it. I had a belt buckle with a Panaflex on it that I got from my uncle.
nice.
On the whole thing. But I'm just, even this is not giving you the history of the company. And there's Panaflex. Yeah. Have to go back.
It's funny, like, pan, and it's
Yeah.
on the belt buckle. It's like
Yeah,
some
Pan.
cool stuff
Yeah.
right there,
Yeah, yeah.
And that was his power. It was like, whatever.
Panavision.
And that was like Pan didn't he have horns? And
Yeah, he was like the satyr.
Yeah, he was a satyr
the goat
who,
sort of horn.
and the witches would fornicate with him. He was like the husband of all the witches.
Yeah. Okay, so the guy was Robert Gottschalk, died in 1982, stabbed to death. Laos Schumann was the name of, like, Laos, the country, and Chuman was convicted of murder and sentenced to 26 years for his killing.
I'm not seeing that name on the cast.
No, you're not seeing it?
No. What is it? Laos?
Laos
Chuman for the second name. You're not seeing it on IMDb or anything like that? Doesn't actually say anything here.
No, nothing.
Well, the internet is losing information at a rapid rate.
Yeah. But definitely Gottschalk was found dead in his Los Angeles home, stabbed to death in 1982. And this guy a year later was sentenced to 26 years. And there is a connection. It might be that the guy who did the killing, that his lover, extra lover, was a person involved with the oust in The King and I, because there were two of them, but one was convicted. All right, so
okay,
that's what I remember about it at the time. And
fair enough. So it wasn't all right. It wasn't my boy.
There's a
MASH.
lot. I mean, if you look at like Hollywood Babylon, like Kenneth Anger wrote a lot of stuff in that book that are true things supposedly, but the underbelly of
his link with what's his name, the
Kinsey
Bussololi.
Oh, Bussololi, yeah,
all that sort of stuff,
right.
But
he was in many things.
Yeah, so Gottschalk, was an out and out, he what's the word? He was an out of the closet gay man living with this Asian guy who was very much his junior and such. And I think the Asian guy had a relationship with another Asian guy of his own age, and they proceeded to concoct a plan to steal money, got caught, stabbed the guy to death, and one of them, went into the whole thing. But my uncle worked for Gottschalk and did a lot of work on that side of things and got a lot of scenes, and was talking to him that really put me off. Well, I don't want to go to Hollywood. It doesn't sound like much fun at all.
Yeah, smart.
It just sounds like it's just
hell.
It's pure positioning, the
Rick Village.
And
the more you dig and learn, the worse it gets.
Whereas where I was in New Zealand and later on in Hong Kong, it was more hands-on filmmaking. You weren't dealing with people that necessarily were purely there for, to become famous. They were actually interested in making stories through the medium of film,
creating something. To stand in time.
I think that Kubrick went to England because it's the only place where he could find, where he could have a big enough studio like Hollywood and still work under the same Warner Brothers. So that's the best he could do to get out of Hollywood. And he saved his family up until he didn't save. I mean, Ryan O'Neal went and got one of them. And then Scientology ultimately got her, Well,
Great Britain had the golden age when Kubrick moved there. He was going through a golden age with David Lean stuff, and Hitchcock was still sort of doing stuff, but he's a He's a piece of work. But, you know, Britain was going through a real golden age of great filmmaking, you know, through David Lean. And you know, Kubrick used a lot of British crews, didn't he, Jordan? As something that you were talking about from the book. He
used a lot of what, sorry?
British crews.
Yes.
Like local people.
Yeah, he kept his crew small and efficient, and he utilized so much from his home and his home kind of base area, especially with like Metal Jacket. It was so close. I'm not sure
he filmed at Pinewood Studios.
I'm not
St.
sure
Albans
actually.
is where he lived.
Yeah, that's not far from where my mother was born. And, you know, Hertfordshire, I think Pinewood Studios is in Hertfordshire. They had Ealing Studios and Pinewood Studios. And Pinewood was the big one in Britain. I don't know if Kubrick ever used it, though.
Okay. I'll look into that.
Okay, sweet.
So, all right, guys. So we're going to wrap it up there. I mean, there's just so much that we've talked about today. I may have to split this in two. I don't know how I'm going to post it, but I mean, it's just a banger of a talk. So I just want to thank you guys so much. I'm super excited about what we've been talking about and just the future of other stuff we can talk about. I've learned a lot today as well, which also has me very excited. And I mean, my notepad is just filled with shit to go look up. So both of you guys, thank you so much. Before we do wrap it, let's take some time for you guys to talk about yourselves. First of all, Troy, why don't you tell us where my viewers and listeners can find you?
Well, the stuff we've talked about through the show, if you sort of look at some of the background material that forms my opinions, I've got a book called Saturn Death Cult, which is available on Amazon Kindle format, a website, saturndeathcult.com, if you want to just have a look before buying the book at what I'm putting out there. I have a second book called The Purple Dawn of Creation. It's kind of like a prequel to the Saturn Death Cult that goes into the cosmology of some of the pretty radical stuff that I'm putting out there in terms of the solar system's history. And yeah, that would probably keep a lot of people busy if they get into that for a while. So,
absolutely.
You know, and thanks very much for having me on.
Thanks for coming back, man. And I hope you'll come back again. This was great.
Oh, yeah.
Sean, why don't you tell us where my viewers and listeners can find you?
Well, you can find me at Wake the Dead. Wake the Dead podcast is listed on at Spotify and all the regular spots like Apple, iTunes or whatever. And you can find all of my video I post on Odyssey, BitChute, and Rumble under Wake the Dead. And you can find kind of the home of all of my work. I'll make pages and kind of build it on the One Great Work. It's onegreatworknetwork.com. Oh, there's my
there you go.
James right now. He's live. Yeah, James Corner is a great friend of mine, and these guys are wonderful people. There's many other creators, and everybody should take a look around. There's a wealth of knowledge. And I have a page here. There I am.
Oh, there you are.
Yep. And you can, I'll make posts of all my stuff, and you can find there's an email link there if you need to contact me. If you care to donate, I highly appreciate it. And there's a place to do that at onegreatworknetwork.com. And you find my name, Sean McCann, under the creator section. Oh, and I sell t-shirts. I have a t-shirt store. storefrontier.com/wake the dead, and anarchist designs and some fine art photography designs. Really great stuff that I'm really proud of. They're all my creations, except for one, but she's my favorite photographer, and I asked her kindly if I could print her shirt, and she said yes. I've got her name listed on the print. Sweet. It's beautiful. It's one of my favorite images. So
cool, man. Well, we'll include all those links in the description.
Okay,
for both of you
wonderful.
guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both again, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Troy, it's probably getting pretty late over there, so yeah, thank you. Yeah, right on, guys.
I'm a night owl.
This was cool.
You're a champion.
This was great, guys. So we'll chat again soon, and you guys both take care. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Ciao.
Just got to clarify something. We were talking about that where my uncle worked for.
Oh yeah.
Good Shark.
Erase the name or something.
The guy was Peruvian, not Asian. His name was Laos Ronnie Chuman.
He had an Asian name, Laos.
Yeah. What's with
that's where it was sort of coming in. He was a lens technician who worked with the company and became this guy's, lover as such. And according to a guy here who worked at the same company at the time, the reason he murdered Gottschalk was not because they were breaking up, which is a story I had always heard, and that it was because Gottschalk wouldn't finance a movie that Schumann wanted to make.
Oh, wow.
All right.
So, sounds like a Bond villain too. Good shot.
A real
things
determined
like that.
artist, I guess.
So this Schumann guy, he had some kind of credit technician for the cameras that were on the King and I, and I think that's where the connection came, just to put that right and such. But yeah, he was that was my one big contact with the Hollywood death machine.
It's good that you got away while you could.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I think I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well,
all right.
Thoroughly
wonderful.
enjoyed myself.
Thank
Me
you.
too. Thanks, guys. All the best.
Awesome.
This was
Okay.
a lot of fun. Cheers.